A warm welcome to all of you listening to my channel. Today's story is titled, My Husband Died in an Accident When I Was 3 Months Pregnant. My mother-in-law tried to force an abortion, then threw me out. At the hospital, a doctor told me, "Come with me. Someone needs to see you." My name is Maya Anderson. I'm 29, a preschool teacher from a small town in Louisiana. I married Leo Davis, a construction supervisor. We got married in May of 2025, and I followed him to Houston, Texas, to live in the house his family had left him. It was a spacious brick house with cream-colored walls and heavy oak doors. The moment you stepped inside, a faint scent of potpourri filled the air, the kind of smell that suggests a home that has always been comfortable and provided for. The day the Greyhound bus pulled into the station, I dragged my suitcase down the steps, my stomach still churning from motion sickness. Leo was already waiting, his plaid shirt sleeves rolled up, a gentle smile on his face. He took the strap of my bag, his tone a mix of teasing and sincerity. "Well, your days as a small-town princess are over now that you're in the big city," he said. "But you'll always be times my times, princess." I felt a blush creep up my neck, but his words warmed me. It wasn't that I was a sucker for sweet talk. It was the relief that after months of a long-distance relationship, I finally had someone waiting for me in the middle of this vast, unfamiliar city. He drove me home in his Ford F-150, navigating through traffic so dense it was almost comical, a symphony of honking horns. I sat in the passenger seat, looking at the glowing billboards, feeling utterly minuscule. "Don't worry. You'll get used to it in a few days," he said. "Houston's like that, but there are a lot of good people here." The gate to his house was made of black wrought iron, opening onto a driveway and a small, well-kept lawn with a red brick path. The moment I stepped inside, I saw my mother-in-law. Brenda Davis was a stout woman, her graying hair pulled back in a neat bun, wearing a plain brown pantsuit. She looked me up and down, her gaze not hostile, but analytical, as if she were measuring and weighing me. Then, a slow smile spread across her face. "You're here," she said deliberately. "You must be tired from the trip. Go wash up, and then we'll have dinner." I quickly clasped my hands. "Hello, Brenda. It's so good to see you." Since the wedding, calling her by her first name felt strange, but I figured that as a daughter-in-law, I had to adapt to their ways. She handed me a pair of slippers, pointed me toward the guest bathroom, and then turned back to the kitchen. The way she organized everything was meticulous. The hand towel hung perfectly folded, the silverware was arranged in its tray with precision, and the pots and pans gleamed. Seeing this, I let out a sigh of relief. I had heard enough of the mother-in-law horror stories to be grateful for one who seemed so orderly. I felt a sense of calm. I remember my first dinner at my husband's home as if it were yesterday. The meal, served on the heavy dining room table, consisted of pot roast, mashed potatoes, a green bean casserole, and a bowl of gravy. The aroma of the roast was so inviting that my stomach rumbled the moment I sat down. Leo put a piece of meat on my plate. "Eat up," he said. "You must be exhausted." His mother gave him a soft look of reproach. "Leo, let her eat at her own pace. A new bride should be mindful of her manners." I quickly set my fork down neatly and smiled. "Oh, it's a habit from working at the preschool. I'm used to eating fast. I'll work on it." She nodded, her eyes softening slightly. I thought to myself, asterisk, if you're a good person, good things will happen to you. I think I'll be okay here, asterisk. But during that dinner, one small detail made me a little uneasy. Brenda didn't ask me about my school or how I enjoyed teaching. She didn't ask about my parents back in Louisiana. Instead, she posed a question that sounded casual but felt pointed. "Do your parents own much land back home?" I was in the middle of chewing and almost choked. I glanced at Leo, but he was pretending to be engrossed in his green beans. A clear signal that I was on my own. I had to answer honestly. "No, ma'am. We just have a small backyard garden. My parents live a simple life," she just said. "Oh," without further comment. But it was a strange "oh." It wasn't the warm, conversational kind. It was more like someone making a mental note, filing away a piece of data. After dinner, I stood up to clear the plates. Leo reached out to help. Brenda immediately cut in. "Men should worry about work outside the home, not things like this. Let your wife do it. She needs to get used to the way we do things here." The phrase "get used to the way we do things" sent a small shiver down my spine. I was used to doing chores back home, but doing them in my own house was different from doing them in someone else's. Even though it was my husband's home, It felt like I was taking an exam for which no one had given me the questions. As I washed the dishes, she stood nearby wiping the counter. She didn't scold or yell. She just offered quiet corrections. Be more gentle with that china, or stack the pots that way so they dry better. Her voice was even, but it felt like a ruler pressed against my back. I was suddenly reminded of the old saying, when in Rome. I told myself I had to be careful, that any small mistake could become a big deal. Later that evening, Leo took me upstairs to our room. Our bedroom was clean, with a window that looked out onto a row of oak trees, a cool breeze drifting in. He opened the closet and pulled out a large body pillow, placing it on the bed. Get some rest, he said softly. If Mom says anything downstairs, you just let me handle it. I looked at him, my heart swelling with emotion. A man who knew how to stand between his wife and his mother, at least in small matters, was a true blessing. I sat on the bed and started unpacking. While rummaging through my bag, I found a small, embroidered handkerchief my mother had tucked in before I left. I held it, suddenly overcome with a longing to hear my parents' voices, but I put it away, telling myself that I couldn't be so sentimental after just arriving. Around dusk, I heard a car in the driveway. I went downstairs to see a paunchy man in his 50s, his shirt untucked, walking in as if he owned the place. My mother-in-law's face lit up. Oh, that's Uncle Hank, my younger brother. I quickly offered a greeting. Hello, sir. Nice to meet you. He looked at me and chuckled. Ah, the new bride. You look like a sweet one. Sweet is good, but too sweet, and you'll have a hard time. I didn't know how to respond, so I just gave a weak smile. He sat down, poured himself some iced tea, and started talking to Brenda as if they were discussing a major business deal. I overheard snippets of their conversation. Paperwork, the deed, signatures. Then I heard Hank say, they're really putting on the pressure now, Brenda. You need to decide what you're going to do. If you wait too long, they'll show up at the house, and we'll have a scandal on our hands. My ears perked up. Asterisk. Who are they? Pressure for what? Asterisk. I looked at Leo. He was leaning against the doorframe, his face tense, but he was trying to act normal. My mother-in-law shot him a sharp glance, her voice low but piercing. Keep your voice down, Hank. The new wife is here. Hank laughed dismissively. For heaven's sake, she's family. A wife is family. That should have been a comforting thing to hear, but it sent a chill through me. The way he said family made it sound like I was an item on a ledger, not a person welcomed into their hearts. That night, in our room, I asked Leo in a very soft voice, what was your uncle talking about downstairs? I heard something about pressure and people coming to the house. Leo was silent for a moment, then he stroked my hair. It's nothing, babe. Just some issues on a project. Don't overthink it. You just got here, you need to rest. Since he said it that way, I didn't dare press further. I knew men had their pride, but a feeling that something was being hidden from me began to feel like a thin thread sawing at my heart. In the middle of the night, Leo got a call. He stepped out onto the balcony to talk, his voice low but urgent. I could still hear bits and pieces from the room. Yeah, I understand. I'll be at the site tomorrow. Yes, I'll take care of that amount, but don't push it. When he came back inside and saw my eyes were open, he forced a smile. Go to sleep, honey. It's just work. I murmured okay and pulled the covers up. In the darkness, I stared at the ceiling. I suddenly remembered a saying my grandmother used to have. You can measure the depth of a river, but the wickedness of a human heart is immeasurable. I didn't want to think the worst, but my new bride's intuition was screaming. That first dinner had delicious pot roast and sweet tea, but I felt a lump in my throat, like I'd swallowed a bone. All I could do was hug my pillow tightly and tell myself, Asterisk Maya, you have a husband who loves you. That's what matters. As for your mother-in-law, just take it one day at a time. Asterisk. But it felt as if, from the very first day I stepped into that house, I was standing before a door with no visible hinges. I had no idea when it would slam shut. After that first night in my new home, I fell into a routine that people often call settling in. It sounds gentle, but in reality, it meant getting used to the fact that my every step, every word, and every meal was being observed and measured. I got a job teaching at a private preschool near the house. Every morning, I woke up before Leo. I'd tiptoe downstairs, intending to make a pot of coffee for Brenda, but she would already be there, stirring a pot of oatmeal, her eyes fixed on me. Up so early, she'd ask. Yes, I'm used to the school schedule. She'd nod. Good. If you're used to it, then do it right. This family doesn't tolerate sloppiness. No scolding, no yelling. But every sentence felt like a brick being placed on the table. Over time, the whole house began to feel like a wall. All I could do was say yes, ma'am, and obey. When I was dressed and ready for work, she would stand in the doorway, inspecting the simple dress I was wearing, and say slowly, "Go to work, but remember to be home in time for dinner." The women in this family don't wander around. I'd force a smile. Of course, I'll come straight home after school. The truth was, I was incredibly busy at the preschool. The children were like a flock of sparrows. I was constantly coaxing them to eat, wiping their noses, and teaching them songs. A colleague asked me, "So, how's life as a newlywed in the big city?" "Must be nice." I gave a vague, noncommittal smile. "It's fine." From the outside, people saw me living in a big house with a husband who was a supervisor, and they probably thought my life was all honey and roses. Only the person on the inside knows that sometimes the honey is just sticky. Around the end of May, my body started feeling strange. I'd wake up with a bitter taste in my mouth, and the smell of cooking oil made me nauseous. At school, while I was helping the kids line up, I suddenly felt dizzy and had to grab a table for support. The school director looked at me with concern. "Maya, are you all right? Could it be good news?" I froze, my heart pounding. I was always careful, and after getting married in March, we had planned on starting a family soon. But when my body sent the signal, I still felt as flustered as a child holding a gift she wasn't sure she was allowed to open. That afternoon, I stopped by a pharmacy near the school and bought a pregnancy test. I hid it in my purse, feeling like I was carrying a huge secret. I waited until my mother-in-law went upstairs to her room and Leo was still at a work site. Then I slipped into the bathroom, locked the door, my hands trembling. When two pink lines appeared, I stood frozen for a few seconds, then broke into a smile, though tears were streaming down my face. I was pregnant. I was really pregnant. I left the bathroom, my hand on my stomach, pacing like a little cat. Joy like that makes you want to shout from the rooftops. But I had to swallow it. In this house, not every happy occasion was allowed to be celebrated in your own way. When Leo came home that evening, he walked in and smelled the soup on the stove. He smiled. "What are we having tonight?" "Smells amazing, honey." I pulled him into our room, closed the door, and whispered, "Leo, I have something to tell you." He looked at me intently. "What is it? Did Mom give you a hard time?" I shook my head and held out the pregnancy test. Leo took it, read it, and then looked at it several times as if he couldn't believe his eyes. Then, he pulled me into a hug, so tight I had to pat his back. "Leo, you're suffocating me." He let go, his eyes red. He knelt and pressed his ear to my stomach, as if he could already hear our baby talking. He whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Hey, little one. It's Dad. I'm here. I'm sorry. I've been so busy. From now on, I promise I'll be home earlier." Seeing him like that, my heart melted. I'd heard people say you only know if a man truly loves his wife when she's pregnant. Leo's love at that moment was so real. I believed that with him by my side, I could get through anything. We went downstairs to share the news. I was as nervous as a student before a final exam. Brenda was folding laundry on the sofa. When Leo said, "Mom, Maya's pregnant," she paused, looked at me for a long time, and then smiled, but it was a calculated smile. "Well, that's good news. This family needs a grandchild to carry on the name." I breathed a sigh of relief, thinking she would be as overjoyed as any other grandmother. But then she continued in her usual, even tone. "If you're pregnant, you have to be careful. From tomorrow, you'll eat according to a menu I prepare. In the morning, you'll have organic smoothies. For lunch, steamed fish. At night, no spicy or acidic foods. And you are absolutely not to go anywhere by yourself." I nodded repeatedly, like a soldier receiving orders. She went to her room and came back with a small notebook filled with tiny, neat handwriting. Times for drinking water, napping, taking a walk. She handed it to me, her tone as firm as a nail being hammered into wood. "Everything in this house is done with discipline. With a grandchild on the way, we must be even more disciplined." Leo tried to interject. "Mom, Maya still has to teach. You have to be a little flexible." Brenda shot him a look. "Someone can drive her to and from work. You're out at construction sites. Who's going to watch your wife?" "I'm saying this for the sake of the baby." The phrase "for the sake of the baby" was impossible to argue with. When someone uses the baby as their reason, you have no choice but to be silent. I suddenly understood a harsh truth of life. Sometimes, even a pregnancy can become an excuse for others to tie you down with soft ropes. From that day on, my mother-in-law seemed to gain a new level of authority. She controlled me not with scolding, but with a schedule. When I woke up, she'd ask, "What are you eating at school today?" When I came home, she'd eye my purse. "Did you buy anything on the way home?" I craved a simple lemonade, but I had to wonder if I'd be accused of indulging in sweets and harming the baby. Once, I let slip. "Mom," she set her glass down, her brow furrowing. "That's too spicy. It'll give you heartburn. Whatever people eat back in your hometown is their business. Here, you follow my way." Just that one phrase, "back in your hometown," made my face flush. It wasn't crude or harsh, but it hit a nerve, reminding me that I was the country girl who had married into their city family. Leo loved me and tried to make up for it. He took me for my first prenatal checkup at a clinic in early June of 2025. The doctor confirmed I was nearly 2 months pregnant and that everything was developing normally. Leo heard the news and grinned like a kid who just won a prize. On the way home, he stopped to buy me a box of cupcakes. "A pregnant wife needs to be spoiled," he said. But the spoiling only lasted a few days before he became incredibly busy. The construction project he was supervising on the outskirts of the city ran into problems. He started leaving early and coming home late. His phone rang constantly with calls from unknown numbers. Sometimes, right after dinner, he'd stand up and go out to the yard to talk, his voice low and fast, his eyes avoiding mine. I'm not a suspicious person, but pregnant women are often more sensitive. One evening, while I was folding some baby clothes I'd just bought, I heard him on the balcony. "Yeah, I get it, but don't call the house. It'll be a problem if my mom finds out. I'll figure it out. Just give me more time." I held a tiny onesie, my hands turning cold. Asterisk. Figure what out? More time for what? Asterisk. I remembered Uncle Hank's words. They're really putting on the pressure. And Brenda's rule that I wasn't to go anywhere alone. Suddenly, everything connected like a thread being pulled taut. I walked out and stood behind him. Leo turned, startled, and quickly ended the call. "Why are you out here? It's windy." I asked him directly, trying to keep my voice gentle. "Is something wrong? I heard you say you needed to figure it out." He forced a smile, but it was stiff. "It's nothing, honey. Just project stuff. You're pregnant. Don't let your mind run wild. Just keep things peaceful." That phrase, "don't let your mind run wild," felt like a lump in my throat. Sometimes, people use gentleness to shut down a conversation. I didn't want to make things harder for him, so I just said okay and went back inside. That night, I lay on my side, my hand on my belly, feeling the tiny life inside that had already changed my heart so completely. I was filled with both love for my child and a creeping fear. I loved my baby because it was the one joy that made me feel like I truly had a place in this house. I was afraid because I was beginning to understand that while a grandchild might be important to my mother-in-law, who held the power in the house was even more important. The next morning, as I brought a glass of warm water to the table, Brenda looked at me and said, as if giving a warning, "When you're pregnant, you need to watch what you say. If something is happening in this house, don't ask too many questions. A woman who knows her place keeps the peace." I stood there, stunned. I hadn't even had a chance to ask anything, and she was already shutting me down. I was suddenly reminded of the saying, "Water flows downhill." It was so true. A daughter-in-law has so many things she wants to say, but often she has to swallow them to keep the peace. I sat down, looking at the breakfast laid out on the table, and a quiet anxiety began to stir inside me, like the distant rumble of thunder on a clear day. But I still told myself, asterisk, I have a baby on the way. I have to be strong. I have to secure a proper place in this world for my child. Asterisk. Even if I had to walk slowly and cautiously, I would keep moving forward. In early July 2025, Leo came downstairs with a duffel bag, wearing a high-visibility vest and holding his old hard hat. He was heading to a construction site in a mountainous region of Colorado, a 2-week assignment. It sounded straightforward, but the way he looked at me as he put on his boots felt strange. It wasn't the look of a man going to work. It was the look of someone who wanted to say something but swallowed it back down. As I walked him to the door, he said, "Listen to Mom while I'm gone. Don't argue with her. Call me if you need anything." Then he bent down, gently touched my belly, and his voice softened. "You be good in there, little one. My mother-in-law stood behind me, her arms crossed, and said something that sounded like concern. Be careful up there. Those mountain roads are dangerous. Whatever you do, stay safe. Then she turned to me. And you, stay put. A pregnant woman shouldn't be wandering around. I murmured, yes, ma'am, but my heart felt heavy. Some warnings sound like they come from a place of love, but they make you feel like you're trapped in an invisible cage. For the first 2 days, Leo still called. Sometimes it was a quick video call from the base of the construction site, the sound of machinery roaring in the background. Other times, it was a short text. I'm okay. Have you eaten? I'd write back long replies, telling him about my day at school, even mentioning my craving for a warm glass of milk. He'd just send a smiley emoji back. That was enough to make me happy. When you're pregnant, you become more sentimental. Just knowing your husband is there is enough to feel secure. On the third day, things started to feel off. That morning at work, while I was helping the children line up to wash their hands, my phone vibrated in my pocket. I thought it was Leo and quickly checked. Nothing. I chided myself, thinking my pregnancy was making me paranoid. But that afternoon, I texted him, "Have you had lunch?" and never got a reply. When I got home, I tried calling. The phone rang for a long time and then went to voicemail. I walked into the house to find my mother-in-law watching the evening news, her eyes glued to the screen. I gathered my courage and asked, "Mom, did Leo call home today?" She glanced at me and answered curtly, "No." "Oh," I said, "he must be busy." She smirked. "He's a man with a job to do. A wife should understand that." I didn't argue. I went to the kitchen to heat up dinner, but the food was tasteless. That night, I tossed and turned, the sound of the ceiling fan clicking rhythmically, but my heart was beating out of sync. I scrolled through my last text exchange with Leo on my phone, a sudden fear creeping in when I saw that the read receipt was no longer appearing. I finally dozed off around midnight, only to be jolted awake by a noise from downstairs, like a chair being dragged. I held my breath and listened. Silence. I tried to calm myself. Asterisk. It's probably just Brenda, getting a glass of water. Asterisk. But my stomach clenched, the kind of knot you get when you have a premonition. Around 4:30 a.m., my phone shrieked. A long, piercing ring that made me sit bolt upright, my heart feeling like it was about to burst out of my chest. An unknown number was on the screen. I answered, and a man's raspy voice on the other end spoke quickly, as if he were in a hurry. "Are you the wife of Mr. Leo Davis? I'm from his company. Please, stay calm and listen to me." I froze. The words "stay calm" always come before something terrible. "Yes," I managed to say. "What is it? What's wrong with my husband?" On the other end, I could hear a jumble of voices, footsteps, and the sound of wind. The man's voice dropped. "The supervisor's vehicle was in an accident on the mountain pass. The state police are on the scene. I need you to prepare yourself." I couldn't hear the rest of what he said. A roaring filled my ears, as if someone had dumped a bucket of water over my head. I managed to choke out one question, my voice distorted. Is he alive?" There was a few seconds of silence on the other end. That silence was like a thin blade, not cutting cleanly, but slowly sawing through me. Then, the man said, "I'm so sorry." I dropped the phone. My legs gave out from under me. I slid off the edge of the bed and collapsed onto the floor, one hand clutching the bedspread, the other pressed against my stomach, as if holding onto the one thing I couldn't bear to lose. I tried to call Leo's name, but no sound came out. My throat was constricted. I tried to stand, to run out of the room, but as soon as I put my foot on the first step, the world started spinning. I heard my mother-in-law's door burst open. "What is it? Who's calling at this hour?" I could only get out 2 words. "Mom, Leo's company." And then everything went black. When I came to, I was on a gurney. The sharp, antiseptic smell of a hospital filled my nostrils, and the fluorescent lights on the ceiling were blindingly bright. I could hear the roll of wheels, nurses calling to each other. There was a dull, persistent ache in my lower abdomen, like a hand squeezing me from the inside. My mother-in-law was sitting beside me, her hand gripping my wrist. Her face was pale, but her eyes were wide and frantic. The moment I opened my eyes, she burst into tears loud, wailing sobs that echoed down the hallway. "Oh, my child, my poor child. Why is life so cruel? How are we going to live now?" I whispered hoarsely, "Mom, Leo." She shook her head, sobbing. "Don't say it. Don't say his name." An ER doctor came over, asked me a few questions, and checked my vitals. He told me I was showing signs of a threatened miscarriage due to extreme stress and ordered me to remain completely still. I panicked, grabbing his white coat. "Doctor, is my baby okay?" The doctor looked at me, his tone serious but not cold. "Ma'am, you need to stay calm. The fetus is still viable, but you must avoid any further emotional distress." The word "still viable" made me break down. I cried like someone who had just been pulled from a river, gasping for air. I wanted to scream for my lost husband, but I also wanted to hold my baby tight because it was still alive. The feeling was tearing me in two. Just then, I heard the scuff of shoes and a booming male voice from the hallway. "Brenda, my God, I just heard the news." Uncle Hank appeared, his shirt wrinkled, his face a mask of feigned shock. He walked right up and, without any preamble, asked, "What did the police say? What did the company say? Do you have the paperwork yet?" Lying there on that gurney, a chill ran down my spine. The man had just received news of his nephew's death, and his first questions weren't "How is Maya?" or "Is the baby okay?" but about paperwork. My mother-in-law wiped her tears, her voice choked. "They said they'll be in touch this afternoon. Right now, we need to take care of Maya." Uncle Hank sighed, but his eyes darted around as if he were doing calculations in his head. "Of course, take care of her. But you need to keep a clear head, Brenda. There are things that, if we don't handle them now, people will come knocking, and that will be a problem." I wanted to sit up and ask. Asterisk, knocking for what? Asterisk, but the doctor had just warned me not to get agitated. All I could do was lie there, staring at the white ceiling, feeling like I had fallen into a deep, dark pit. Outside the ER, the sounds of the hospital people coming and going, names being called over the intercom, the wail of an ambulance, all merged into a chaotic symphony. And within that chaos, I could clearly hear my own heartbeat and my baby's, both faint, both fighting to go on. I suddenly remembered an old saying: when it rains, it pours. When you're happy, life seems simple. But when tragedy strikes, it doesn't just knock, it kicks down the door. I turned my face to the wall, trying to swallow my sobs to protect my baby, but hot tears still streamed down my face, soaking the pillow. I didn't know how I was going to survive, but I knew in that moment that I had lost my anchor and, at the same time, been thrust into a new life. A life where every word someone said could be a knife. And I would have to learn how to catch it with my bare hands. The next morning, I was discharged from the hospital on the condition that I remain emotionally stable. The doctor repeated his warning over and over. "You're at risk for a miscarriage. Go home, don't cry too much, and don't overthink things." All I could do was nod. In truth, I didn't even know where I was. My head felt like it was stuffed with cotton, everything distant and blurry. My mother-in-law took me home in a taxi. In the car, she wasn't crying like she had been at the hospital. She sat up straight, holding her phone and making one call after another, her voice firm and decisive, like someone in command of a familiar task. "Yes, I need you to process that confirmation for me." "That's right, we'll handle the memorial service at the house." "Yes, send it over as soon as you can." I sat beside her, my hand on my belly, staring out the window. The city was still bustling, cars were still moving, people were still laughing and talking, as if my husband's death had nothing to do with their world. That was a special kind of pain, the kind no one else can see. When we arrived, Uncle Hank was already waiting by the gate, smoking a cigarette, his expression grave. When the taxi stopped, he opened the door and helped me out, but it was a perfunctory gesture. His eyes were scanning the inside of the house, as if he were counting the people there. "Maya, you're back. Go lie down. This is terrible for a pregnant woman." Then he turned to Brenda. "Brenda, the county clerk's office is asking for the death certificate and the accident report. If we're missing anything, it'll delay the process." The phrase "delay the process" made my skin crawl. Asterisk. What process? Asterisk. He spoke of a funeral as if it were a real estate transaction. Brenda nodded. "I know. You handle the external matters. I'll handle things inside." With that, she helped me into the house and onto the sofa. She propped a pillow behind my back, her voice soft. "You have to protect the baby, Maya. The little one is Leo's flesh and blood." The sound of my husband's name made my throat tighten. I bit my lip to keep from crying, remembering the doctor's words. I managed to ask quietly, "Mom, are they bringing his body home?" She glanced at me, then answered quickly. "The company said it's very difficult. The accident was severe. They'll handle things according to their protocols. We'll hold the memorial service here." I didn't have the strength to ask more. There was a void inside me, and every question just made it deeper. I was afraid of falling in. I sat there silently, my eyes fixed on our wedding photo hanging on the wall. The two of us, dressed in white, smiling brightly. It felt like a lifetime ago. By the afternoon, the house began to fill with people. Neighbors, relatives from my husband's side, Brenda's acquaintances. They came and went in a steady stream. The sounds of greetings, chairs being scraped, sighs, and whispers of "so tragic" filled the air. My mother-in-law had changed into a black dress, a mourning veil on her head, and sat in the center of the living room like a pillar of strength. I was also given a black dress to wear, but because of my pregnancy, she told me to sit in a corner to avoid being jostled. A distant cousin came and held my hand, speaking loud enough for everyone to hear. "Oh, you poor thing, a new bride and already a widow. The heavens are so cruel." Someone else sighed. "I heard she's from the country. She probably didn't even have a chance to enjoy the good life." The comments were meant to be sympathetic, but they stung my pride. I didn't want to be seen as the pitiful country girl. I wanted them to see me as Leo's wife, a grieving, pregnant woman, not an object of pity to be measured and weighed. By evening, an altar was set up. The photo for the memorial was a passport-style picture of Leo taken from his company file. His expression was serious, his eyes looking straight ahead. Brenda arranged the flowers, lit the incense, and placed a plate of fruit on the altar. Then, she turned and pulled me toward it. "Go, pay your respects to your husband." I knelt, my forehead touching the cold tile floor. The scent of incense filled the air, stinging my eyes. I could hear a pastor's voice from the backyard, reciting a prayer. The sound of a small bell chimed rhythmically. I suddenly felt like I was in a play where I didn't know the script. As I bowed my head, I whispered in my heart, "Leo, if you still love me and our baby, please watch over us." When I stood up, my legs were weak. My mother-in-law embraced me in front of everyone, her body shaking with sobs. "Oh, Maya, from now on, it's just you and me. We have to lean on each other. Leo has left us." She cried so loudly that the women around us began to sniffle too. I was trapped in her embrace, her shoulders heaving. But a memory from that morning flashed in my mind. Brenda, in the taxi, her voice firm and businesslike on the phone. I didn't want to think ill of her, but it felt strange, as if she were crying at the right time, in the right place. As night fell, the guests thinned out. I was exhausted, my heart and my back aching. I asked for permission to go to my room to rest. Brenda nodded. "Lie on your left side. And don't cry anymore." I went upstairs and lay in the darkness, listening to the muffled voices from downstairs. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but Uncle Hank's voice was naturally loud and carried easily. "Brenda, where are the papers for Leo's life insurance policy from the company? We need to file the claim soon so we can get the money and take care of things." Brenda replied, her voice low but sharp. "Not so loud. His wife is in the house." Hank scoffed. "She has to know eventually. And with her being pregnant, we need to get our ducks in a row. If she starts making demands later, it'll be a mess." Lying in bed, I clenched the sheets. I didn't understand what demands he was talking about, but I understood the feeling of being weighed and measured while I was still grieving. Brenda continued, her voice like a command. "You take care of the death certificate. And tomorrow, file the paperwork at the courthouse. I'll handle things inside the house." "You got it, Brenda," Hank said, his voice lowering conspiratorially. "And remember, this house is worth a lot. Don't let there be any loopholes." I felt a chill run down my spine. My husband had just died, and they were already talking about the value of the house. I was reminded of an old saying my grandmother used to repeat: "Money is thicker than blood." Some people love their family because they are family, but some people love the family assets more than the people. The second morning of the wake, I went downstairs early. The altar was still shrouded in smoke. I was about to change the water in the flower vase when I saw my mother-in-law was already there. She glanced at me and said, "You've done enough. Let me handle the important things." I looked up. "I just want to help, Mom." She looked directly into my eyes, a smile as thin as a blade of grass on her lips. "The way you can help is by protecting that baby. If anything happens to it, you'll have a lot to answer for to this family." It sounded like concern, but the words "answer for" choked me. Answer for what? For keeping the baby, or for my very existence? That afternoon, a representative from the company came with a stack of papers. He used a lot of terms I didn't understand: on-site report, accident confirmation, compensation, procedures. My mother-in-law listened, nodding at all the right moments. Uncle Hank, however, asked detailed questions about every single amount, his tone as casual as if he were haggling at a flea market. I sat beside them, my hand on my belly, my head spinning with every word. At one point, I wanted to stand up and scream, "That's my husband you're talking about." But I didn't have the strength, and I was afraid that any agitation would harm the baby. That evening, a neighbor whispered to me while Brenda was in the kitchen, "You take care of yourself, dear. The world is a tough place, but good people get good things in the end. I can see how much your mother-in-law loves you." I forced a smile. "Yes," I said, just to be polite. Love? Maybe it was love, but the kind of love that came with conditions, with warnings, with control. It felt like a velvet cloth wrapped around a noose. From the outside, it looked soft, but you never knew when it would tighten. On the second night, I sat before the altar, looking at Leo's picture. In the dim light, his face was so serious, as if he were still trying to tell me something. I clasped my hands, trying to hold back my sobs, telling myself I had to protect my baby, to protect myself. I didn't know what the future held. I only knew that from the moment the wake began, I no longer felt like a daughter-in-law being sheltered. I felt like a pawn on a chessboard. Everyone was watching me. Everyone was calculating, but no one bothered to ask if I was in pain. After 49 sticks of incense had burned down to stubs, the prayers faded. The stream of visitors trickled to a stop, and the house returned to its natural state, spacious, clean, and silent as a sealed box. I thought the quiet would be a relief, but this wasn't a peaceful quiet. It was the stillness of the water's surface before a storm, where the slightest touch could create waves. That morning, I woke up early, planning to make some thin oatmeal that would be easy on my stomach. The morning sickness had been bad, and solid food often made me nauseous. The moment I stepped into the kitchen, I saw my mother-in-law already sitting at the table. In front of her was a stack of papers, and next to it, a small box containing a set of keys. She didn't look at me, but simply said, "Sit down." I froze, my hand still on the back of a chair. Her voice wasn't loud, but it had the weight of a command. "Yes, ma'am?" She pushed a piece of paper forward, her voice as monotonous as if she were reading from a ledger. "From now on, there are going to be some changes around here. Leo is gone, and I am the head of this household. You're pregnant and shouldn't be overexerting yourself, so it's best you don't do anything without my permission." The words "Leo is gone" felt like a jab at a fresh wound. I swallowed hard and said quietly, "I know. I just want to help." She looked up. For the first time, I saw a different look in her eyes. They were no longer red-rimmed with grief. They were cold, analytical, and seemed to see right through to my bones. "Help with what? You've only been here a few months. To be frank, you're an outsider who walked into this family. I'm in charge." I thought I had misheard. I sat there, stunned, my hands clenched so tightly my knuckles turned white. She pulled the key box closer, opening the lid with a sharp click that made me jump. She emptied a set of keys onto the table. The gate key, the front door key, the garage key, even the key to Leo's truck. "From now on, I will hold the keys. When you come home from work, you will ring the doorbell. If you want to go anywhere, you will ask me." My mouth fell open, but no words came out. I wasn't a child to be controlled like this. But I was pregnant. I knew I was in a vulnerable position. I tried to remain calm. "Brenda, I have a set schedule at work. It would be easier if I had a key, just in case you're out." She cut me off, her voice sharp. "There's no need for easier. There are no just-in-cases in this house. You will do your part." Asterisk, my part? Asterisk, the words felt numb. What was my part? The grieving widow or the freeloader? She didn't stop there. She pushed another piece of paper toward me, a neatly written list of chores. Asterisk, morning, sweep the patio. Midday, mop the stairs. Afternoon, do the laundry. Evening, clean the kitchen. Asterisk. At the bottom, a note was added. Asterisk, no eating out. No food deliveries. Asterisk, I looked at the list, my head spinning. I was still working a full day, and now I was expected to do all of this, while my pregnancy was already at risk. I looked up, my voice trembling. "Brenda, the doctor told me to limit strenuous activity. I'm afraid this will affect the baby." She smirked as if I'd told a joke. "The baby? The baby is all the more reason for you to learn your place." Do you think being pregnant gives you the right to do whatever you want? This house doesn't support lazy people. My face burned. The word lazy was like a slap. Back home, I had taught school and helped my parents in the garden. No one had ever called me lazy. I wanted to argue, but I remembered her earlier words. Asterisk. A woman who knows her place keeps the peace. Asterisk. I was afraid of making a scene. Afraid the stress would harm my baby. I could only say quietly, I'm not lazy. I'm tired. She tapped her fingernail on the table. A rhythmic times, click, click, click times that felt like nails being hammered. Tired or not, you will do it. Women have babies while working in the fields. You have it easy here, and you're still complaining. My eyes stung. I turned away, trying not to cry. The doctor's words echoed in my head, but tears welled up anyway, because she had attacked my dignity. People can take your money, they can take your things, but when they take your self-respect, that's what truly hurts. Just then, Uncle Hank walked in, holding a cup of coffee and smiling broadly. Well, what are you two talking about that's so serious? My mother-in-law no longer bothered with the pretense of politeness she had maintained during the wake. She said bluntly, I'm telling her that from now on, she will follow the rules of this house. I'm keeping the keys. I will know where she is and what she's doing at all times. Hank nodded and turned to me. Listen, honey, when in Rome, I'll be honest with you. Now that you're pregnant, you should listen to your elders. You don't want to get a bad reputation. Asterisk. A bad reputation? Asterisk. There it was again. I suddenly understood that in this house, reputation was more important than a pregnancy. I stood up, intending to go to the kitchen to escape the conversation, but my mother-in-law's voice stopped me. Wait, there's one more thing. She walked to a cabinet, opened a drawer, and pulled out a savings passbook and several envelopes, placing them on the table like evidence. She looked at me, her voice icy. I'm holding on to the money from the funeral donations. We'll need it for important matters later. You are not to touch it. I was stunned. I hadn't even thought about the donation money. All that was on my mind was Leo and the baby. And yet, she had brought it up first, as if she were afraid I would try to take it. I tried to explain, Brenda, I wasn't going to. That wasn't my intention. She waved her hand dismissively. Good. I'm just making things clear. A husband's work is a wife's gain, but your husband is gone. From now on, there will be no splitting of assets in this house. That sentence felt like a vice squeezing my heart. People use proverbs to offer wisdom. She used them to shut me up. I looked her straight in the eye. For the first time since becoming a daughter-in-law, I spoke clearly. I'm not asking for anything. I just want to be treated with respect in this house. I am Leo's wife, and I am carrying his child. My mother-in-law looked at me as if I were a disobedient child and let out a cold laugh. Wife? You were his wife. But what kind of wife? You hadn't even warmed your place in this house before you brought bad luck with you. Leo worked in construction for years, and nothing ever happened. He marries you, and a few months later, this. People might not say it, but I see it. I was speechless. There wasn't a single curse word in her speech, but every sentence dragged me through the mud, making me the cause of the tragedy. I heard a faint snapping sound in my chest, like the last thread of hope had just broken. I turned and walked to the kitchen, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped the pot. I stood at the sink and turned on the faucet. The water rushed out, but it couldn't wash away the humiliation. I had always believed that if you were a good person, good things would happen. But in that moment, I had a bitter thought. Maybe if you're too good, people just see it as an opportunity to push you around. That afternoon, my mother-in-law served a simple lunch and said nothing more. Her silence was more frightening than her harsh words. It felt like she had finalized my position in the house. I ate without tasting anything. A piece of fish felt stuck in my throat. That evening, I came home from work early because I was feeling exhausted. I rang the doorbell and waited. After a long moment, my mother-in-law opened the door, looked me up and down, and asked a single question. Where have you been? I was speechless. I was coming home from work, but I had to answer as if I had been out playing. I replied, school ended early today. She didn't say okay, just turned and walked back inside, leaving me standing at the door with my shoes still on. The heavy oak door closed behind me with a solid thud. I suddenly felt like a guest in my own husband's home. That night, I went to my room and, out of habit, picked up my phone to text Leo, only to remember that the person who would have read that message was gone. I sat on the floor, my hand on my belly, and forced myself to breathe. The baby inside me was a reminder that no matter what anyone said, I had to keep living. I wiped my tears and made a small, silent vow. Maya Anderson. You can be patient, but you cannot let them crush you. For your child, you have to be strong. Asterisk. From the day my mother-in-law took the keys, my life changed completely. It no longer felt like coming home. It felt like checking into a strict boarding school. If I wanted to leave, I had to report it. If I was going to be late, I had to ask for permission. But as a teacher, my schedule wasn't always predictable. Some days, a child would have a fever, and I'd have to wait with them until a parent arrived late. If I was even 15 minutes late, the moment I rang the doorbell, I'd hear Brenda's soft cough from inside, a sound that had become a signal of my transgression. One afternoon, I had just stepped into the yard when Brenda's voice called out from the house. Go wash your hands, and then come to the kitchen. The house is dusty today. I responded like a robot. Yes, ma'am. I changed my clothes, and before I could even sit down for a moment, she had placed a broom in front of me, her voice cold. Sweep the patio. It's covered in leaves. I looked at the patio. There were only a few scattered leaves, but she spoke as if it were a garbage dump. I took the broom and went outside. The afternoon wind blew dust into my eyes, making them sting. As I bent down to sweep the leaves into a dustpan, I felt a sharp, warning twinge in my lower abdomen. I straightened up, rubbing my belly and trying to breathe evenly. Brenda stood on the steps, not moving closer, and simply said, "Pregnancy is not an excuse to get out of work." Her words were like a thin blade, not drawing blood but cutting deep into my self-respect. I clenched my jaw and continued, the doctor's warning to avoid strenuous activity echoing in my head. But who was there to defend me? The one person who would have become a picture on an altar. That night's dinner is one I'll never forget. My mother-in-law served a pot of cold rice, a bowl of watery cabbage soup, and a plate of fried eggs so thin they were translucent. The moment I smelled it, I felt a wave of nausea. Pregnancy had made my sense of smell hypersensitive. I tried to eat, but the first bite made me gag. I put down my fork and said quietly, "Mom, I'm feeling a little sick. Could I please have a small bowl of oatmeal instead?" She looked at me, her eyes like ice. This family eats dinner. Oatmeal is for sick people. Are you trying to be sick? I swallowed. No, I'm just afraid of throwing up. It might affect the baby. She gave a cold laugh. What kind of baby is so fragile? Other pregnant women eat whatever's put in front of them. Stop being so picky. Uncle Hank, who was sitting with us, scooped an egg onto his plate and added, "If you can eat, eat. If you can't, don't." It's morning sickness, not a royal decree. The word princess stung. The day I arrived in Houston, Leo had jokingly called me his princess. Now, the word was being used to mock me. I picked up my fork and tried to take another bite, but my throat wouldn't cooperate. I stood up and rushed to the bathroom, dry heaving until tears streamed down my face. I held my belly, terrified that I was harming my baby. When I came out, Brenda didn't ask if I was okay. She just said, "Clear the table. You've ruined the meal." I stood there, stunned. I didn't know if I had thrown up from morning sickness or from humiliation. That night, I lay in my room, my stomach growling. I opened my drawer and took out a pack of crackers I had brought from school, secretly eating a few to stop the dizziness. I felt like a thief eating in my own room. I had to laugh at myself. A wife and daughter-in-law, forced to eat in secret like a child. The next morning, I tried to get up early to cook a small pot of oatmeal with some ground turkey for protein. I figured if I made it myself, I wouldn't have to ask. But just as I had ladled half a bowl, my mother-in-law came downstairs and saw the pot, her face darkening. "What are you cooking?" "Oatmeal," I said. "My morning sickness is bad, and this is easier to keep down." She placed her hand on the lid of the pot and slammed it shut with a loud Times clang asterisk. "Put it away. This house doesn't eat things like that. If you want to eat that, you can go eat outside." Her words were a trap. She forbade me from going out alone. So telling me to eat outside was like locking both doors. I stood there silently, then said softly, "Mom, I just want to be healthy enough to work and to provide for my child." She looked at me, her voice slow but sharp. "If you want to provide for your child, you will listen to me. If you don't, and you miscarry, who will be responsible?" It was a threat disguised as a question. The thought of it terrified me so much that I didn't dare defy her. I put the pot of oatmeal in the refrigerator, a sour taste in my mouth. At school, my exhaustion was visible. I'd get dizzy after standing for just a few minutes. One day, while carrying a tray of food for the children, My hands started shaking, and I nearly spilled soup all over the table. The school director pulled me aside and whispered, "Maya, you look so thin for someone who's pregnant. Are you not eating enough at home?" I gave a weak smile. "It's just the morning sickness." She looked at me as if she wanted to ask more, but she didn't. There was no point in telling anyone. They couldn't solve my problems. All I could do was endure. Around the middle of August, it was time for my next prenatal checkup. I had asked my mother-in-law for permission the day before. She glanced at a calendar and said, as if setting a condition, "You can go, but come straight home afterward. No detours." I agreed. That day, I walked to the end of the street to catch a rideshare. As I stepped out of the gate, I had the strange feeling that someone was watching me. I turned and saw a man standing across the street, wearing a baseball cap and pretending to be on his phone. I couldn't see his face clearly, but he didn't look like he was waiting for a ride. A shiver went down my spine. I told myself I was just being paranoid. But as my rideshare drove away, I noticed a motorcycle in the rearview mirror, keeping a steady distance behind us. I looked again. It was the same man in the cap. My heart started pounding. I told the driver, "Sir, can we take that side street? I'm a little nervous." The driver looked at me in the mirror and nodded. "Sure thing, ma'am. Just sit tight." He turned into a crowded side street, and when I looked back, the motorcycle was gone. I let out a breath, my hand on my belly, telling myself to calm down. But the fear had planted a thorn in my heart. At the hospital, the doctor who did the ultrasound said the baby was fine, but I was underweight and needed to eat more. He asked, "Are you under a lot of stress? Is everything okay at home?" I shook my head, not daring to tell him the truth. I just said, "I'm having bad morning sickness." The doctor advised me to eat small, frequent meals of whatever I could tolerate. "Don't let yourself get too hungry," he said. I held the instruction sheet, feeling like I was holding a cry for help that I didn't know who to send it to. When I got home, I rang the doorbell. My mother-in-law opened the door and glanced at the bag of prenatal vitamins in my hand. "What did the doctor say?" "He said I need to eat more, that I'm underweight." She frowned. "You're underweight because you're a picky eater. You complain about everything I cook. You're making things so difficult." I wanted to say that I wasn't complaining, but I was too tired, physically and emotionally. I went straight to the kitchen to start cleaning, as was my routine. As I was wiping the counter, I heard my mother-in-law talking to Uncle Hank in the living room, her voice just loud enough for me to hear. "She's so weak for a pregnant woman. If something happens, it'll reflect badly on our family." Uncle Hank replied nonchalantly, "Don't worry about that. Just focus on securing the house and the paperwork. We can deal with the daughter-in-law later." I froze, the cleaning rag dropping from my hand. Asterisk. Deal with the daughter-in-law later. Asterisk. What did that mean? I didn't want to think about it, but my mind conjured up the worst possibilities. That night, I lay curled up in bed. I had only managed to eat one bowl of rice and a few crackers all day. I was hungry, but I couldn't swallow. I placed my hand on my belly and whispered, as if to comfort myself, "Hang in there, little one. Mommy is hanging in there." People say having a child brings wealth, but all I wanted was for my child to give me the strength to live. The thought brought tears to my eyes, not because I was weak, but because I was starting to feel cornered. Inside the house, I was the one who had to know her place. Outside, I felt like I was being followed. I was trapped between two walls, and the more I struggled, the more I got hurt. But just then, my phone vibrated with a text from an unknown number. It was a single sentence. "Don't trust anyone in that house." I stared at the screen, a cold dread washing over me. That text message from the unknown number kept me awake almost all night. Asterisk. Don't trust anyone in that house. Asterisk. I read it over and over, the palm of my hand cold and clammy. I typed a reply. "Who is this? Why are you telling me this?" But the message only showed a single check mark. Sent, and then nothing. The silence was like someone breathing a cold breath on the back of my neck. I was scared because I didn't know who they were, and angry because if they knew something was wrong, why not just say it instead of throwing me a cryptic warning and disappearing? The next morning, I woke up with swollen eyes. I spent a long time washing my face, trying to hide the signs of my sleepless night. At nearly 3 months pregnant, my body was already weak, and now my mind was in turmoil. Staring at my reflection, I told myself to stay calm. The doctor had warned me, getting agitated would harm the baby. The moment I stepped downstairs, I heard my mother-in-law on the phone in the living room. her voice sharper than usual. What do they want now? I already told you. We're handling it. Don't come to my house. She slammed the phone down and turned to look at me, her eyes like a thin, sharp blade. Come here. I need to talk to you. I sat on the edge of the sofa, my heart pounding. I didn't know if it was from fear or hunger. I'd barely eaten since the night before. Brenda placed a thick envelope and a folded piece of paper on the coffee table in front of me. She didn't beat around the bush. I'll be direct. Your being here is just getting in the way. This family is going through a difficult time. You're pregnant. You can't help with anything, and you're just causing me more trouble. I swallowed hard. Brenda, I'm still working. I'm still doing the chores. I'm just asking for a little consideration with the food. She cut me off with a wave of her hand. Don't try to take credit. You work for yourself. This family doesn't need your money. Her words made my face burn with shame. I had never asked her for a single penny. I worked because I wanted to stand on my own 2 feet. But I knew that arguing would only add fuel to the fire, so I softened my tone. What did you want to talk about? Please, just tell me. She pushed the piece of paper toward me. On it was the address of a clinic, handwritten in a strong, deliberate script, with an appointment time written below. I looked at it, and my heart seized. What? What is this? She looked at me directly. A clinic. I want you to take the money in this envelope, go there, and terminate the pregnancy. A roaring filled my ears. I thought I had misheard. What did you say? This is Leo's child. This is your grandchild. She gave a cold, humorless laugh. Grandchild? A grandchild that will be used to tie me down. Leo is gone. Do you think that by keeping this baby, you can hold on to this house? I shot to my feet, my hand instinctively flying to my stomach. No, I'm not trying to hold on to anything. I just want to have my baby. I was Leo's wife. I can't do that. She slammed her hand on the table. Sit down. I trembled but remained standing. She continued, each word a blow to my dignity. You're still young. If you have a child without a father, who's going to support you? And what will people say about this family? I'm telling you this for your own good. I was choked with emotion. For my good? Or for yours? Her eyes narrowed. Don't be disrespectful. You've been eating and sleeping in my house for months. Now, you will listen to me. A fish that doesn't heed the salt will rot. Do you understand? I looked at the envelope. My hands were shaking. On the corner, she had written the amount, $5,000. To me, at that moment, it was a lot of money, but it had been placed on the table like the price for a human life. I said, my voice hoarse and stiff, Mom, please. I'll endure any hardship. I'll even move out. Just let me keep my baby. She burst out laughing, a sound that made my skin crawl. Move out? With what money? A preschool teacher's salary. And what happens when the debt collectors find you? What if they take you? Or the baby? Who will be responsible then? I froze. Asterisk debt collectors. Asterisk. So the feeling of being followed hadn't been my imagination. I looked at her and saw it all with horrifying clarity. She wasn't afraid times for times me. She was using that fear to manipulate me. Just then, Uncle Hank walked in, jingling his car keys. He glanced at me, then at the envelope, his tone casual but venomous. Brenda's right. Keeping that baby will only cause more trouble. Honey, if you know what's good for you, you'll listen. Don't give people a reason to call you greedy. I turned to him, my eyes red. How can you say that? This is Leo's flesh and blood. Hank shrugged. Flesh and blood has to consider the circumstances. And you don't understand the circumstances of this family. The room felt like it was tilting. I didn't know if I was standing or falling. I could feel a knot tightening in my stomach, as if the baby inside me was panicking too. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm, and said clearly, I won't do it. Even if you throw me out, I won't do it. My mother-in-law looked at me as if I were a stubborn animal. She slowly stood up and walked toward the stairs. I thought she was letting it go, but a few minutes later, she came back down, dragging my suitcase. The same suitcase I had arrived with. She threw it onto the floor with a loud thud. If you won't do it, then get out. I stood there, paralyzed. Everything inside me went numb. She pointed to the door. This is the Davis family home. Don't think that being pregnant gives you the right to stay. I gave you a choice. If you won't take it, then you can face the consequences alone. I looked at my suitcase lying on the floor. The zipper burst open, a few of my clothes spilling out. My dignity had spilled out with them, right in front of the 2 people who were supposed to be my husband's family. I tried one last time, my voice a raw whisper. "Mom, I'm not asking for your property. I'm just asking for a place to stay until the baby is born. Then I'll work and support my child." Brenda's face was a mask of contempt. "If you want to support your child, go back to your family in the country. Don't be an eyesore here. From now on, this house has only one mistress." Uncle Hank walked over, yanked the door open, and dragged my suitcase out to the porch as if it were a bag of trash. "Just go quietly," he said, his voice devoid of any emotion. "Don't make a scene and embarrass everyone." I followed him out, my legs feeling like they didn't belong to me. The midday Houston sun beat down on my face. I stood in the yard, my hand on my belly, staring at the black wrought iron gate, the same gate I had walked through just a few months ago, filled with hope for a new life. My mother-in-law stood in the doorway, not taking a step outside. She tossed the envelope and the piece of paper with the address onto the ground at my feet. "I've shown you the way. The rest is up to you." I bent down and picked up the paper, my hand shaking so much it rattled. I picked up the envelope, not because I wanted the money, but because I knew that once I walked out that gate, I would have almost nothing to my name but the phone in my pocket and a small amount in my bank account. I looked up at her, my lips pressed into a thin line. I couldn't bring myself to call her mom anymore. My throat was tight with a stone of grief. Finally, I managed to say one thing, very quietly. "I will not get rid of my child." She didn't reply. The heavy oak door closed, slowly but definitively, like the lid of a coffin being sealed on a relationship that had died long before my husband. I dragged my suitcase to the curb, the wheels clattering on the pavement, each sound like a blow to my heart. I watched the traffic rush by, everyone busy, everyone in a hurry. No one knew that I had just been thrown out of my husband's home while carrying his child. I thought of my parents in Louisiana, of the looks I would get from the neighbors if I showed up pregnant and without a husband. I thought of the old saying, "A daughter-in-law's path is paved with 100 sorrows," and a bitter taste filled my mouth. But then I placed my hand on my belly and took a deep breath. I may have been kicked out of a house, but I would not kick my own child out of my life. I tightened my grip on the handle of my suitcase, stuffed the piece of paper into my pocket, not to use it, but to remember how I had been treated. I started walking in the heat, telling myself, Maya, as long as you can stand, your child has a mother, *. I had only walked a short distance when my legs started to give out. The midday Houston sun felt like a furnace. I had nowhere to go, and I couldn't bring myself to call my parents. I was more afraid of my mother's sigh, of my father's silence, than any scolding. I stopped at a convenience store, bought a bottle of water, and sat on the curb under the shade of the awning. My hand rested on my belly as I took short, shallow breaths. In my purse was the envelope with $5,000. It felt like a life raft that had been thrown to me, but a life raft covered in mud. I didn't want to touch it, but I couldn't pretend I didn't need it. I had to live, so my child could live. I took out my phone, opened the map, and searched for the nearest women's health clinic, deliberately avoiding the address my mother-in-law had given me. I wasn't foolish enough to walk into a place that had been set up for me like a trap. I chose a small clinic in a quiet neighborhood, its signs simple and discreet. It wasn't fancy or crowded, just private enough. I called a rideshare, telling the driver to take the main road before turning into the side streets, a precaution that had become second nature. All I wanted was to hear my baby's heartbeat, to know that we were okay, to find the courage to take the next step. The clinic was at the end of a quiet street, a simple glass door with the words Women's Health and Prenatal Care stenciled on it. I walked in, the faint smell of antiseptic in the air. The receptionist asked for my name and how far along I was. "Maya Anderson," I said, my voice still trembling. "Almost 3 months." The receptionist gave me a brief glance and handed me a clipboard. In the waiting room, there were a few other pregnant women, their husbands sitting beside them, holding bags of snacks and drinks. I looked at them and felt a pang of loneliness, a feeling of being completely out of place. Their husbands were right there, alive and well. The thought was a dagger, and I had to bite my lip to keep from crying. A few minutes later, the door to the examination room opened, and a man in his late 50s stepped out. He had salt and pepper hair, wore glasses, and his white coat was perfectly pressed. He looked at a chart and called out, "Miss Anderson." His voice was deep and warm, the kind of voice that inspires trust. I walked in, my hand still protectively on my belly. He motioned to a chair. "Have a seat. Are you feeling all right?" I nodded. "A little sick," I admitted. "And I've just had a shock." He looked at me intently, his eyes kind. You can be honest here. No one is going to judge you. For some reason, that simple sentence made my throat tighten. The world was so quick to judge, especially a pregnant woman who showed up to an appointment alone. I didn't tell him everything, just a vague version. I'm having some family problems. He didn't press for details, just asked me to lie down for the ultrasound. I lay on the table, staring at the white ceiling, my hands clenched at my sides. The cold ultrasound gel on my skin made me flinch. The doctor looked at the screen, tapping a few keys, and then the room fell silent. I panicked. Doctor, is my baby okay? He pressed a small button, and a rhythmic sound filled the room times. Thump, 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 thump times as clear and strong as a drum. My baby's heartbeat. I froze. And then I started to cry, uncontrollable sobs that streamed down the sides of my face. The doctor handed me a tissue, his voice still even. The fetus is stable. The heartbeat is strong. You can relax. I choked out, thank you, doctor. I was so scared I wouldn't be able to protect him. He looked at me and said slowly, you can protect him, but you have to protect your emotional state as well. You're malnourished, sleep-deprived, and under extreme stress. That's a dangerous combination. I wiped my tears and tried to breathe. He continued the ultrasound and then said something that made my heart ache with both joy and sorrow. It's a bit early, but it looks like you're having a boy. My hand went to my stomach, as if to hold this tiny piece of sunshine in my life. A boy. If Leo were still alive, he would have been grinning from ear to ear. The doctor wrote a few notes in my file, then looked up, his tone conversational. How long did you and your husband know each other? I paused. We dated for over a year before we got married. He nodded. Did either of your families object to the marriage? The question surprised me. I answered honestly. No, not really. It's just that my family is from the country, and his is from the city, so there are some differences. He asked another question. How long has your husband been gone? I stiffened. I didn't want to talk about it, but his tone was so calm that I felt compelled to answer. Since the beginning of July. He made a soft ah sound, then stood up and poured me a glass of warm water. Drink this. It'll help with the dizziness. I took the glass, feeling both grateful and suspicious. He was being too kind in a way that didn't feel random. I looked at him, my mind racing. Doctor. He held up a hand. We can talk about the bill later. Just sit and rest. There are a few things I want to say to you. I sat back down, my confusion growing. He pulled his chair closer and lowered his voice. Do not go to the address they gave you. Do you understand what I'm saying? I was startled. How? How did you know about that? He didn't answer directly. I've seen a lot of things in my profession. When I look at you, I see someone who is being backed into a corner. But listen to me. Do not give up this baby. His words were like a clean life raft thrown directly to me. I nodded vigorously. I won't. I swear. I won't. He looked at me for a moment, then said slowly, I want you to come with me to meet someone. After you meet them, you'll understand why you're being treated this way. But you must remain calm and, under no circumstances, make a scene here. I swallowed. Who is it? He answered succinctly. Someone who knew your husband very well, and who knows your husband's family very well. A chill ran down my spine. The anonymous text message flashed in my mind. Asterisk. Don't trust anyone in that house. Asterisk. I didn't know if I could trust this doctor, but I didn't have many other options. The baby inside me was a reminder. Make the right choice. Don't be reckless. I hesitated. Doctor, I'm scared. He looked me straight in the eye, his gaze steady. You have to be brave. It's not right that you're going through this alone. I was silent. His words struck a chord deep within my soul. I clutched my purse and gave a small nod. My dear listeners, if this story resonates with you, please give our channel a like to show your support. If you were in my shoes, pregnant, and thrown out onto the street, would you choose to endure it silently or stand up and fight for justice? Please leave your comments below. And I urge you to listen to the end, because the surprise that follows will change everything. Is the truth about Leo what I thought it was? The doctor led me out through a back door of the clinic, avoiding the crowded waiting room. He called a taxi and told the driver to keep the air conditioning on low so I wouldn't get a chill. His careful planning made me even more curious. I memorized the license plate number, a habit I'd developed for self-preservation. The taxi stopped in front of a small, quiet coffee shop on a tree-lined street. The doctor helped me out of the car. Sit at that corner table, he said. I'll bring the person to you. I sat down, my hands wrapped around a warm mug of tea. my eyes fixed on the door. My heart was pounding even harder than when I had heard my baby's heartbeat. I told myself not to get my hopes up. Asterisk. The higher you hope, the harder you fall. Asterisk. But a small voice inside me kept whispering. Asterisk. What if? Asterisk. The door opened, and a man walked in. He was tall, with a sun-weathered tan, the kind of man who was used to working outdoors. He scanned the room, and when his eyes landed on me, he froze. His eyes were red, as if he hadn't slept in days. The doctor pulled out a chair and made a brief introduction. This is Maya Anderson. Maya, this is Ryan Carter. My heart clenched. Ryan Carter. Leo's best friend, the one he had always talked about. Asterisk Ryan's a good guy. Loyal. Asterisk Ryan sat down across from me. His hands clasped together. His voice hoarse. Maya, I'm so sorry. I'm late. I swallowed, trying to keep my voice steady. What? What do you know about my husband? Just tell me. I can handle it. Ryan looked down for a long moment, then met my eyes, his expression that of someone about to reveal a forbidden secret. He spoke slowly, each word landing like a stone in water. Maya, you have to stay calm. Leo. Leo might not be dead. The words Leo might not be dead landed on the table like a bomb that didn't explode, but sent a numbing shockwave from my fingertips to my spine. I gripped the warm mug so tightly I thought it would shatter. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. When you're in that much shock, the tears don't come right away. My throat was just dry. What did you say? My voice was a broken whisper. Ryan, please, don't joke about something like this. Ryan's shoulders slumped, as if he were carrying the weight of 100 cement bags. His voice was barely audible, but every word was clear. I wouldn't joke about this. I'd rather you hit me than lie to you. But you have to understand, this is not as simple as an accident. I turned to the doctor, whose name I now knew was Evan Miller. He sat there calmly, his expression unchanging, as if he had already anticipated my reaction. He simply said, "You need to hear the whole story." I turned back to Ryan, asterisk. If Leo is alive, then what was the funeral? The altar? The days I spent kneeling and grieving? Asterisk, Ryan bit his lip, his eyes red. It was a cover-up. Like I said, I only know parts of the story. Leo. He was very secretive. A laugh escaped my lips, but it sounded like a sob. Secretive. So secretive that he let me get thrown out on the street. Let them try to force me to abort our child? That's his idea of being secretive. Ryan held up his hands as if to ward off a blow. Maya, I know you're angry, but if you listen to the end, you'll see that even Leo didn't anticipate how far things would go. He pulled a folded stack of papers from his pocket and laid them on the table. They weren't deeds or legal documents, but photocopies of construction contracts and supply invoices. He pointed to a line, his voice a mixture of anger and helplessness. Leo got caught in a trap. The supplier inflated the cost of materials and then shifted the blame to the supervising team. When it came time for inspection, they claimed the materials were substandard, breached the contract, and demanded compensation. I sat there, frozen. How much? Ryan said the number, and it was a figure from another universe, something that had no place in the life of a preschool teacher. But now, it was sitting right there, on the table in front of me. $1. In sync million. Where would Leo get that kind of money? I asked, my mouth dry. Ryan shook his head. He tried everything. He took out loans, borrowed from everyone he knew, even used his bonus. He was planning to pay a portion to buy time while he gathered evidence to sue them, but they wouldn't let him. They threatened to go to the house, to make a public scene, to force him to pay immediately. I remembered Brenda's angry phone call, the feeling of being followed. The pieces of the puzzle started snapping together, forming a picture that chilled me to the bone. So, the accident? I asked, my heart hammering. Was it real? Ryan swallowed hard. There were irregularities. From the moment I heard the news, something felt wrong. First, the official paperwork came through way too fast. Second, a guy at the company whispered to me that someone had taken care of everything. Who? And how so quickly? Then, I heard a rumor that an unidentified body had been used to complete the paperwork. I was dizzy. I put my hand over my mouth, afraid I was going to be sick. I didn't want to believe it, but I couldn't dismiss it either. As the old saying goes, where there's smoke, there's fire. I looked Ryan straight in the eye. Are you telling me that the man we buried was not my husband? Ryan was silent for a long time. That silence was like a slap in the face. Then he gave a very slight nod. A laugh, sharp and painful, escaped me. So, who was I mourning? Who was I crying for? And who did I perform funeral rites for? I gripped the edge of the table. Where's Leo? Does he know I was kicked out of the house? Ryan glanced at Dr. Miller, as if asking for permission. The doctor remained silent, just giving a small nod. Ryan continued, his voice dropping. Maya, Leo told me that I was only to tell you if you were pushed to the absolute limit. He was afraid the shock would affect the baby. He thought. He thought his mother would protect you. I looked up, my voice sharp. His mother? You mean Brenda? Ryan lowered his head, his voice choked. Yes. I pressed on, my politeness gone. She knew? She knew all of this, and she still tried to force me to have an abortion? She still threw me out on the street? Ryan didn't look at me, but his words were clear. She knew about the dead. She knew Leo had to disappear. And she played a part in making things worse. My ears were ringing, just like they had at the hospital. I remembered Brenda's face, her arms around me as she cried at the funeral. I remembered her words. It's just you and me now. It was all a performance. I wanted to jump up, run back to that house, and demand an explanation. But then my hand touched my belly. The baby was still there, so fragile. I had to stay seated. I lowered my voice, but it was trembling. Tell me what she wanted. Ryan sighed. I can only tell you what I know. She was afraid the creditors would make a scene, and that it would affect her assets. And she never liked you, because you were from the country. She saw the baby as a liability. She thought that if you were gone, everything would be easier to handle. Asterisk easier to handle. Asterisk. So my child and I were something to be handled. I looked at Ryan, my last hope. And Leo? Did he really want to abandon us? Ryan shook his head vehemently. No. Leo loves you so much. He was just trapped. He trusted his mother. You know, people say, like mother, like son. But sometimes, the good mother part is just for show. I couldn't speak. It felt like a part of my world had just collapsed, while the other part had turned to stone. I was no longer the naive Maya who had first arrived in the city. Ryan pulled his chair closer and lowered his voice. Maya, you have to listen to me now. Don't go back to that house. Don't call her and start yelling. You're pregnant. You're vulnerable. They want you to be silent. The more of a scene you make, the more danger you're in. A bitter laugh escaped me. I was silent, and I was thrown out on the street. Ryan nodded, his face pained. I know, and that's why I have to give you this. He reached into his bag and pulled out an old, beat-up phone, a burner phone. He placed it in my hand as if it were a sacred artifact. This was Leo's. He hid it. I've been holding on to it for him. There's something on here you need to hear. I stared at the phone, at the cracked screen and worn edges, as if I were looking at the hand of the man who had disappeared. I pressed the power button, and a password screen lit up. I don't know the password, I said, my throat tight. Ryan looked at me, his eyes full of apology. He said that if you couldn't open it, you should try something related to you and the baby. I placed my hand on my belly and took a deep breath. A single date flashed in my mind, a date that had become my mantra. The baby's due date, the one the first doctor had given me. My fingers trembled as I typed in the numbers, my heart pounding, afraid of being wrong, of having my hopes dashed. The screen unlocked. I froze, and tears fell onto the screen before I could wipe them away. I wasn't crying from weakness, but because, for a fleeting moment, it felt like Leo was standing right beside me, whispering, Asterisk, I'm still thinking of you. Asterisk. On the screen were a few old apps, some pictures from construction sites, a few notes, and a single folder with a simple name. Home. I raised my finger to touch it, but I hesitated, afraid that what I was about to see would change my life forever. I took a breath, tapped the screen, and sat there, staring at the small light in my palm, like a candle in the darkness. The phone's screen glowed in my hand. The home folder opened to reveal a list of audio files, named simply by date. Some were labeled evening, others morning. Some were just a string of numbers. I looked at Ryan, my throat dry. What are these? Ryan answered quietly. He used to record important conversations, arguments, just in case he needed to remember things accurately later. That's how Leo was. Cautious. I bit my lip. Asterisk, cautious. And he still walked into a trap. Asterisk, I put in the earbuds. Ryan handed me and pressed play on the first file. A soft static, and then Leo's voice, tired but calm. Mom, I told you. I'll be gone for a few months. I'll handle this, and I'll come back. Maya's pregnant. I can't just abandon her. Then, Brenda's voice. In the recording, it was different from the voice she used with me. It was lower, sharper, devoid of the moral superiority she usually projected. Don't be a fool. If you're going to disappear, you need to do it cleanly. If you leave your wife here, the creditors will come after her, and they'll drag this whole family through the mud. Leo's voice was strained. I told them not to make a scene. Maya doesn't know anything. She's innocent. Brenda scoffed. Her being innocent is what makes her easy to manage. If you love her, you'll take her with you. Don't let her latch onto this house. The phrase easy to manage made the hairs on my arm stand up. I remembered her hugging me at the funeral, telling me we had to lean on each other. But in the recording, she treated me like a problem to be solved. Ryan sat across from me, unable to meet my eyes. I played another file. This time, Uncle Hank's booming voice cut in. Brenda's right. You need to get the paperwork for this house in order. If that daughter-in-law gets her hands on anything, it'll be a mess. Wait until she has the baby, then she'll use the grandchild to manipulate you. You'll soften up, and the whole plan will be ruined. Brenda's voice was cold. When have I ever been soft? I'm only soft in front of outsiders. In this house, I make the decisions. I took out the earbuds for a second, just to breathe. The air in the coffee shop felt thick and heavy. I placed my hand on my belly. It felt like the baby was curling up inside me. Ryan quickly said, Maya, drink some water. Don't let your blood pressure drop. I don't want any, I said, looking directly at him. You knew about this. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Ryan's voice was choked with guilt. Leo made me promise. He knew that if you found out, you would confront his mother, and it would be dangerous. He was afraid you'd get agitated, afraid for the baby. A bitter laugh escaped me. He was afraid I'd get agitated. But he wasn't afraid his own mother would throw me out on the street? Ryan looked down. I'm not defending him. I was trapped too. Brenda is not someone you cross. And on top of that, there's the debt and the people who were following you. The mention of being followed sent another chill down my spine. So I hadn't imagined it. I pressed play on another file, my hand struggling to stay steady. This recording didn't start with Leo's voice, just the sound of a door closing, footsteps, and then Brenda's voice, giving an order. You will listen to me. You will cut off all contact. You will disappear. I will tell your wife that you are dead. She'll cry for a few days, and then she'll get over it. She's pregnant. She has her own problems to worry about. Leo's voice was sharp. What are you talking about? I won't let you say that. Brenda's voice was relentless. You won't let me? You're the one in debt. I'm being direct with you. A poor daughter-in-law can't help you. If she has that baby, it will become a chain around your neck. You'll never be able to start over. My ears were ringing. Asterisk. Start over. Asterisk. So, in her mind, Leo already had a new life planned, and my baby and I were just obstacles. I took off the earbuds and looked at Dr. Miller. He maintained his calm demeanor, like a chess player who already knew the outcome of the game. Doctor, I asked, how did you know to bring me here to meet Ryan? He answered slowly. Someone asked me to. I just did what was necessary to keep you from walking into a dangerous situation. The answer wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either. Before I could press him, Ryan put his hand on the table, speaking quickly, as if afraid I'd get lost in suspicion and lose my focus. Maya, what's important is that you know the truth now. Don't go back to that house. Don't call and yell at her. They're waiting for you to do that, to give them an excuse. I looked at him. An excuse for what? Ryan sighed. An excuse to say you're emotionally unstable. An excuse to say you're making things up. An excuse to push you even further away. We have to be smart. We need evidence. I looked down at the phone. There were other things in the home folder. Pictures of documents. Screenshots of text messages. I opened one. It was a chat between Uncle Hank and Brenda. I didn't need to read the whole thing. One sentence was enough. The notary is a friend. Just say the daughter-in-law left voluntarily, and we're covered. I gasped for air, as if someone were squeezing my chest. Asterisk, voluntarily. Asterisk. They had already prepared the legal language to make me the one who had abandoned the family. If something had happened to me, they could have just said, she left. We don't know where she went. My mother's words came back to me. Be good to others, and God will be good to you. I had always believed that. But now, I understood the other half of that lesson. The one that life teaches you. being good isn't enough. You also have to protect yourself. I looked up, my voice hoarse but firm. Ryan, I have nothing left to lose but my child. Tell me exactly what I need to do. Ryan seemed to have been waiting for those words. First, you need a safe place to stay. Second, you need to change your number temporarily so they can't find you. Third, keep this phone safe. We need to back up the data. Fourth, you have to pretend to be weak, to make Brenda think you're scared and that you'll disappear, just like she wants. I frowned. Pretend to be weak? Ryan nodded. Call Brenda. Tell her you're going somewhere else for the duration of your pregnancy, that you won't bother her. Don't mention the recordings. The more submissive you seem, the more complacent she'll become. The irony was not lost on me. In this world, even being good was a strategy. And a place to stay? I asked. I know a woman who runs a boarding house, Miss Rosa, Ryan said. She's a bit rough around the edges, but she has a good heart. Her place is quiet and safe. You can stay there while we figure out our next move. I looked out the window. The traffic was still flowing. People were still going about their lives. In just a few days, I had gone from being the lady of a spacious house to a woman dragging a suitcase down the street. If it weren't for my child, I probably would have collapsed. But because of my child, I couldn't allow myself to. I took the old phone and put it deep in my purse. I turned to Dr. Miller. Doctor, thank you for letting me hear my baby's heartbeat and for bringing me here. But from now on, I'll handle this myself. I don't want to be indebted to anyone else. Doctor. Miller looked at me, his expression unreadable. You're right. Sometimes, a debt can cost you your whole life. But don't worry, I don't need you to repay me. It sounded kind, but it only reminded me to be more vigilant. In life, the things that are free are often the most expensive. I stood up. Ryan quickly took my suitcase. Take it easy, he said. Don't overexert yourself. I nodded and walked out of the coffee shop. The wind carried the smell of exhaust and sun-baked pavement. I no longer felt as lost as I had when I was standing in front of that black gate. Not because I had help, but because I could now see my enemy clearly. That evening, I followed Ryan to Miss Rosa's boarding house. She looked me up and down, saw my pregnant belly and exhausted face, and clicked her tongue. Lord have mercy. A pregnant girl in this condition. Come on in, honey. In this world, we have to look out for each other. I'm not rich, but I won't leave a mother and her baby out on the street. Her simple, kind words made my eyes sting. I bowed my head and thanked her, my heart finally starting to slow down. I had a temporary roof over my head. That night, I lay on the small but clean and quiet bed. I took out my phone and looked at Brenda's number. My finger hovered over it for a long time. I could no longer think of her as mom, but I had to play my part. I took a deep breath and sent a single, submissive text that made my own stomach turn. I'm okay. I'm going to go somewhere else to rest until the baby is born. I won't bother the family. After sending it, I turned off the screen and placed my hand on my belly. I felt a soft kick, as if in response. I whispered, so quietly only I could hear, "Don't worry, little one. I don't need anyone to love me. I just need to be smart enough to keep anyone from hurting you." The night at Miss Rosa's boarding house was so quiet I could hear the fan whirring and the drip of a faucet in the hallway. But my mind was anything but quiet. I lay on my side, my eyes wide open, replaying the image of Brenda shouting, "Get out," and the envelope of money hitting the pavement. Around 10 p.m., Miss Rosa knocked on my door with a bowl of hot chicken soup. "Eat up, honey. A pregnant woman can't go hungry. You need strength to be a mother." I took the soup, my voice a quiet thank you. The warm broth was comforting, but after a few spoonfuls, my heart started pounding again, a reminder that my work was not done. I took out Leo's old phone and opened the home folder again. Ryan had helped me back up some of the files, but I needed to listen myself. Some things you have to hear with your own ears to understand the danger you're in. I clicked on a file near the end, one labeled with just a string of numbers. The first sound was the flick of a lighter, then a man's voice, raspy and cold. "Don't worry. On that mountain pass, all it takes is one truck accidentally swerving into the wrong lane, a loss of control. The police will rule it an accident." I froze, the spoon halfway to my mouth. Then, Brenda's voice, not loud or sharp, but so cold it made my skin crawl. "Good. Make it look clean. No loose ends." The man chuckled. "Not a problem. Just make sure the money is transferred on time. After it's done, we've never had this conversation. The spoon fell from my hand, clattering on the floor. I didn't dare breathe. I stared at the wall, as if it could hear my heart screaming. This wasn't a threat from a debt collector. This was the voice of someone who had already made a decision, calmly and dispassionately. I took off the earbuds, my hand on my belly, trying not to be sick. A bitter taste filled my mouth. An old proverb flashed in my mind. What goes around, comes around. But how could evil sit there, drinking tea, and ordering a man's death as casually as ordering groceries? I called Ryan immediately. My voice was shaking so much I had to bite my lip to keep it steady. Ryan, I listened to another one. It wasn't just a setup. Someone arranged for a truck. Brenda, she said to make it clean. The other end of the line was dead silent. Then, Ryan let out a sharp breath. Maya, stay calm. Don't talk loudly. Are you in your room? Yes. Lock the door. Don't go outside. I'm on my way, but I'll take a roundabout route. I hung up and locked the deadbolt. I pulled the curtains shut and peered through a small gap. The street outside was normal, but in my eyes, every shadow was a threat. A little while later, Ryan arrived. He knocked 3 soft times and said the code phrase we'd agreed on. Miss, Rosa sent me with some prenatal vitamins. I opened the door. He took one look at my pale face and frowned. You heard it, right? Did you save it? I handed him the phone and pointed to the file. He listened, and his face darkened. He muttered a curse under his breath, then looked at me apologetically. Sorry, Maya. I shouldn't have. I shook my head, my voice hoarse. Don't apologize. Just tell me what we do now. He sat down, rubbing his face like a man who hadn't slept in weeks. Then he spoke, slowly and deliberately. First, this is serious evidence. We can't use it to threaten Brenda. Second, we have to get this to the police, but in a way that ensures your safety. I swallowed. I'm scared. What if they find out I have the recording before the police can do anything? They'll silence me. Ryan nodded. I'm scared too. That's why we don't go alone. We don't make an appointment. We find someone with authority who can handle this discreetly. I looked at him. Do you know someone? He hesitated for a moment, then said, There's a Lieutenant Mark Evans. He worked a case involving a construction accident a few years ago. I met him once. He's a straight shooter. The title lieutenant was both terrifying and a ray of hope. Even though I didn't know the man, it felt like there was a path forward other than just enduring. But who am I to go to a lieutenant? I asked, feeling small and insignificant. Ryan looked me straight in the eye. You're the victim's wife. You're the one with the evidence. And you're doing this for your child. That's enough. I was silent. I remembered Miss Rosa's words. You need strength to be a mother. My greatest duty now is to my child, and my strength had to be my clarity. Ryan continued. Remember the feeling of being followed? They might have been watching you for a while. Everything we do now has to be clean. Don't use your old number anymore. Turn off your regular phone and leave it in your room. If we need to communicate, we'll use a different way. I looked at my own phone. It suddenly felt like a beacon, telling them exactly where I was. I asked quietly, but Brenda, how could she do something like this? Ryan gave a sad smile. Greed blinds people, and there's someone else behind this. The man in the recording, he doesn't sound like a regular debt collector. He sounds like a professional. A chill ran down my spine. This was no longer just a family dispute. This had the smell of blood. I sat on the edge of the bed, my hand on my belly. My baby was quiet, but I knew that one wrong move, and that quiet could be broken forever. I spoke slowly, forcing myself to be a different person. Ryan, I'll cooperate, but you have to promise me that my child will be protected. Ryan nodded firmly. I promise. He took out a pen and paper and wrote down a list. Make another copy of the recording on a USB drive. Take screenshots of important text messages. Note the time and date of each file, and list the names of everyone involved. He made me memorize the address of the boarding house and my room number, in case of an emergency. As he was writing, Miss Rosa must have overheard our hushed voices. She didn't ask questions, just poked her head in the door. You two eaten yet? Don't skip meals. A pregnant woman skipping meals is a sin. I looked at her, my throat tight. A stranger, offering more care than my own family. I nodded. Yes, ma'am. I've eaten, miss. Rosa looked at me, her gaze deep, and then said quietly, In this life, if you walk in the dark long enough, you're bound to see a ghost. But if you haven't done anything wrong, you have nothing to fear. You just protect that belly. Everything else will fall into place. Her words weren't a dismissal, but the wisdom of someone who had seen it all. That night, after Ryan left, I sat against the wall and listened to the recording one more time, just to be sure. Each word, "make it clean," was like a needle pricking my brain. I finally understood. Brenda's talk about reputation, about being the sole mistress of the house, wasn't just bitterness. It was the declaration of someone willing to remove any obstacle, even a human one. I turned off the phone, my hand on my belly, and took a deep breath. I was no longer praying for someone to love me. All I had was my child and a path I had to walk carefully. I wiped my face, sat up straight, and whispered to myself, "Maya, you can be scared, but you cannot panic. Do not let their evil drag you down with them." The next morning, Miss Rosa knocked on my door early. She had a bag with a warm breakfast burrito and a carton of milk. "Eat up, honey," she said in her gruff, caring way. "Don't be thinking so much you forget to eat." I took the food and thanked her. The warmth of the burrito settled my stomach. As I ate, I looked at Leo's old phone, tucked away in a cloth bag, a heavy weight in my heart. Ryan had arranged to meet me at the end of the street at 7 a.m. He had given me specific instructions. "Don't pack much, just my ID, a few loose-fitting clothes, my prenatal vitamins, and the most important thing, the USB drive with a copy of the recording." He also told me to dress simply, wear a wide-brimmed hat, and a face mask. "Look like you're going on a quiet retreat, not like you're running away," he'd said. "The more you look like you're hiding, the more you stand out." The irony was bitter. I wasn't running away. I was trying to survive. But apparently, even survival required a performance. I sent one last text to Brenda, just as we'd planned, keeping it soft. "I'm going to a church retreat to pray for Leo and the baby. I'll be gone for a few days." I didn't wait for a reply. I turned off the phone. Every time I saw her name, I heard the words "make it clean," and my heart clenched. I pulled my small suitcase out of the room. Miss Rosa was leaning against her doorframe, watching me. She sighed. "You take care of yourself out there. If you get into trouble, you call me. I don't have power or money, but I won't turn my back on you." I nodded, my eyes stinging. "Thank you, Miss Rosa. I'm so grateful." I bowed my head, a gesture of respect for the kindness of a stranger. At the end of the street, Ryan was waiting. He wore a baseball cap and a light jacket, his eyes scanning the area with a practiced vigilance. When he saw me, he just gave a slight nod. "Let's go." We took a rideshare to the bus station. Ryan made sure I sat on the side away from the door, and he kept asking if I was feeling dizzy. I sat quietly, my hand on my belly, mentally repeating the doctor's advice. Breathe evenly, eat small, frequent meals, stay calm. The bus station was a chaotic scene of people hauling luggage and calling out to each other. I stayed close to Ryan, not daring to look anyone in the eye for too long. It felt strange, like I was doing something wrong, when all I was doing was trying to protect my child. Ryan bought tickets for a bus heading toward the mountainous region in Colorado where Leo's company had been working. He whispered, "Do you remember Leo talking about a monastery up in the mountains? He said that when he felt overwhelmed, he liked to go there because it was so peaceful." I'm thinking, if he's alive and hiding, he'd go to a place like that. I nodded. I had a vague memory of him mentioning a quiet, remote monastery with a winding road leading up to it. At the time, I had barely paid attention. Now, those forgotten words were a lifeline. The bus pulled out around 9 a.m. I sat by the window, watching the city skyline recede, replaced by strip malls, then fields, then long, empty stretches of highway. Ryan handed me a carton of milk and some crackers. "Just sip and nibble," he said. "Don't let yourself get an empty stomach." I did as he said, knowing that a long bus ride could be hard on me. Every time the bus hit a bump, I held my belly and closed my eyes. My mind filled with two conflicting images. Leo pressing his ear to my stomach when I first told him I was pregnant, and Brenda's cold voice saying, "Make it clean." One was life, the other was death, and they were at war inside me. The bus stopped at a rest stop, and Ryan had me get out and walk around a bit. I splashed water on my face in the restroom and looked at my reflection. My face was pale, my eyes had dark circles, my lips were colorless. Asterisk Maya, asterisk I told myself, asterisk don't be weak. Weakness is not an option, asterisk. As I came out, I saw a man standing near the vending machines, wearing a black baseball cap and holding a phone. He wasn't looking directly at me, but his posture was eerily familiar. It was the same posture as the man I had seen the day I went for my checkup. My heart leaped into my throat. I grabbed Ryan's arm and whispered, "Ryan, that man, he looks like the one who was following me." Ryan didn't turn his head. He just gave a quick glance and then pulled me along, his voice calm. "Don't stare. Act like you don't see him. We'll get back on the bus." I followed him, my heart pounding. From my seat, I looked out the window. The man was still standing there, but next to him was a motorcycle with an out-of-state license plate. I wasn't sure if he was following us, but the feeling of being watched returned, sharp as a thorn. As the bus continued, the road began to climb. The constant curves made me dizzy. Ryan asked the driver if I could move to a seat with less motion. I leaned my head against the seat, listening to the engine strain, and thought of the mountain pass, of a truck losing control. The thought alone was enough to make my blood run cold. Late that afternoon, we got off in a small town at the foot of the mountains. Ryan rented a room in a clean, modest motel. He chose a room on the ground floor, away from the main office, with a window that faced the side of the building, offering a potential escape route. Hearing him explain his reasoning, I realized the full extent of my new reality. I was living like a hunted animal. I had just set down my suitcase when my phone rang. An unknown number, but the contact name that popped up made me freeze. Dr. Miller. I hadn't saved his number, but he had called me once from the clinic. I hesitated, then answered, not knowing if ignoring it would be more dangerous. "Hello, is this Maya Anderson?" Dr. Miller's voice was as warm and calm as ever. "Yes, doctor. I was just calling to check on you. How have you been? Is the pregnancy going well? You shouldn't be traveling. This is a sensitive time." I swallowed, glancing at Ryan. He signaled for me to keep it short. "I'm fine. I'm resting." "Doctor," Miller continued, his tone so gentle it would have sounded like genuine concern to anyone else. "Remember what I said. Don't trust strangers. If you need anything, you call me. I'm a doctor. I won't harm you." The phrase "I won't harm you" sent a chill down my spine. Truly good people don't have to announce their goodness. I kept my voice steady. "Thank you, doctor." He gave me a bit more advice about diet and rest, then hung up. I stared at the black screen, my throat tight. Ryan immediately asked, "What did he say?" I told him. Ryan frowned. "From now on, don't answer that number. We don't know whose side he's on." I nodded, but his deep, calm voice haunted me. It didn't sound like a random doctor. It sounded like someone who was much, much closer to this story than he should be. That night, we ate at a small diner. I managed to eat some baked fish and a salad, which was easier on my stomach. At a nearby table, a group of men were talking about construction, about the price of materials, about how the trucks had to be careful on the mountain roads. I heard them, and my hand tightened around my fork. Their ordinary words had become words of death to me. Back at the motel, Ryan checked all the locks, then handed me a bottle of water and a prenatal vitamin. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow, we'll ask the locals how to get to the monastery." I lay down and pulled up the covers, but I couldn't close my eyes. I listened to the sounds of the night, a passing car, a distant dog barking, the mountain wind whistling through the cracks in the window. And in that quiet, I was reminded of the saying, "A day on the road is a year of learning." I hadn't traveled far, but I had learned so much. I had learned how to survive, how to protect my child, and how to not trust the wrong people. I placed my hand on my belly and whispered, "Go to sleep, little one. We have a long day tomorrow." Outside my window, under the dim yellow light of a street lamp, a figure walked by, paused for a moment, and then continued on. It was probably just someone taking a walk. But ever since I was thrown out of my husband's home, I no longer believed that anything was just a coincidence. Early the next morning, a mist still clung to the small town. I sat up to see Ryan already standing by the window, looking out as if on guard. Hearing me stir, he turned and handed me a bottle of warm water. "Drink a little," he said. "The climb to the monastery will be tough. Don't go on an empty stomach." I nodded, taking small sips. In the motel mirror, my face was still pale, but there was a new hardness in my eyes, the kind of hardness a person gets when they're no longer allowed to fall. We hired a local man with a jeep to take us to the base of the mountain. Ryan told him to take a scenic route, avoiding the main road. The driver, a weathered man with kind eyes, glanced at my pregnant belly and said, "Going to the monastery to pray for a safe delivery? Take it slow on the mountain path. Those cliffs are no joke." The words "cliffs" and "no joke" made me pause. I placed my hand on my belly, took a deep breath, and told myself I was searching for life, not for fear. At the base of the mountain, the road narrowed into a steep path. On one side was a rock face, on the other, a deep ravine. The wind carried the scent of damp leaves and cold earth. With every step, I could hear my own heartbeat, not from exhaustion, but from a nervous anticipation. Ryan stayed close, offering his arm whenever the path was slippery. "Don't rush," he said, slow and steady. I murmured, "Okay." I felt like I was walking through a fog, clinging to those two words, slow and steady, to keep from falling. The monastery gate appeared after a turn in the path. It was not grand, but ancient and beautiful, with moss-covered walls and a curved, tiled roof. A large Bodhi tree stood guard in front. The soft chime of a bell seemed to calm my racing heart. As I stepped through the gate, my feet felt lighter, as if the sacred ground itself demanded a sense of peace. In the courtyard, a few worshippers were lighting incense. Ryan led me directly to the guest house. A young novice opened the door, glanced at me, and bowed his head. "Peace be with you. Who are you here to see?" I pressed my hands together. "We've come to pray for my husband's well-being and to inquire about a visitor who may have stayed here." The novice led us to the abbot. The abbot was a man in his 70s, thin, but with bright, clear eyes. He sat perfectly still, his voice deep. "Speak freely. The monastery is a place where people leave their burdens." His words made my throat tighten. I tried to stay calm, explaining briefly that my husband had once spoken of this place. I had come to light an incense stick and to ask if a man named Leo Davis had sought refuge here. The abbot looked at me for a long time, then answered succinctly, "There is no one here by that name." I was taken aback. Ryan stepped forward. "Venerable sir, he has a scar on his hand, and he's tall. Perhaps you would recognize him by his description?" The abbot shook his head, his voice unchanged. "People come and go. I do not keep track, and if I did, it would not be my place to say." The phrase "not my place to say" sent a chill through me. A monk does not lie, but he can choose not to tell the truth. I glanced around the guest house and noticed a door on the western side, slightly ajar, a curtain fluttering in the breeze. My heart started to beat faster. I bowed my head. "Venerable sir, I am just a pregnant woman. I don't mean to cause trouble. I just need to know if he is alive." The abbot's gaze fell to my belly, and his eyes softened slightly. He sighed. "Child, you must steady your heart. Some doors are not meant to be opened until the time is right." His words were both painful and frustrating. I hadn't come here for a lesson in Zen. I had come to find my husband, to find the truth, but I maintained my composure. This was a holy place. We asked for permission to light an incense stick. The abbot nodded to the novice, who brought us the incense. I knelt before the main altar, my hands clasped, my mind a tangled mess. Amidst the fragrant smoke, I whispered, "Leo, if you are here, please give me a sign." I stood up to leave, and as I did, the novice walked by, whispering to another novice. But I heard him clearly. The guest in the west room said that if anyone asks, we are to say he is not here. I spun around. Ryan did too. The novice, realizing his mistake, turned pale and stammered, I misspoke." I stepped toward him, my voice hoarse. "The guest, is he tall, with a scar on his hand?" The novice looked from the abbot to me, his eyes wide with fear. The abbot gently tapped a small wooden drum beside him, the sound a sharp reminder. The novice immediately bowed his head and fell silent. Ryan pulled me back, whispering, "Don't push him, Maya. The abbot might be protecting him." I nodded, but my eyes were fixed on that door to the west, a new hope flaring within me like hot coals. I remembered an old lullaby my mother used to sing. The heavens that make the elephant also make the grass to feed him. I had been pushed to the edge, surely. The heavens would not leave me without a way out. I asked the abbot for permission to walk in the back garden to get some fresh air. He nodded, only cautioning, "Walk slowly, and do not go alone." Ryan and I walked along a stone corridor. The closer we got to the western side, the colder the air became. I could hear my own footsteps and my own heartbeat, as if they were in a race. Just as we neared the wooden door, a familiar, deep voice came from behind us, as soft as the wind, but it made me freeze in my tracks. "Maya, you've come a long way." I turned. Dr. Evan Miller was standing at the end of the corridor, wearing a gray jacket and holding a string of prayer beads, looking for all the world like a pilgrim. His smile was still kind, but his eyes were not. They were cold, calculating, and held no surprise at seeing me there. I took a step back instinctively. "Doctor, what are you doing here?" He gave a small laugh. "I told you not to travel. The mountains are high. The roads are empty. If something were to happen, who would save you?" Ryan immediately stepped in front of me, his voice a low growl. "You followed us." Miller tilted his head, as if he'd heard something amusing. "Followed you?" "No. I just arrived at the right time." A cold dread washed over me. I looked at the prayer beads in his hand. They suddenly seemed like a prop. He took another step, his voice still deep, but each word was sharp. "Ryan, did you really think bringing her up here was a smart move? A monastery is a place where people hide, but it's also a place where they can be found." Ryan clenched his fists. I could hear his knuckles crack. I pulled on his sleeve, whispering, "Ryan, don't." Miller laughed, his pretense of kindness gone. "Maya, be a good girl. I understand you want to keep the baby, but you're keeping it in the wrong place." I was trembling, but I forced myself to speak. "Who are you?" He didn't answer right away. He glanced toward the main hall, then at the abbot in the distance. The abbot was still standing there, his expression grave. Miller smirked. "I'm the person who helps make things clean, just like they wanted." At that moment, from both ends of the corridor, several men appeared. They were rough-looking, their eyes darting around. They did not look like pilgrims. One blocked the way down, another stood behind us. I heard Ryan take a sharp breath and whisper, "Maya, get against the wall. Don't let them grab you." I pressed my back against the cold stone, my hands on my belly. A proverb my grandmother used to say flashed in my mind. "If you walk with the Buddha, wear a saffron robe. If you walk with ghosts, wear a paper one." I thought I had come to a place of peace, but a man in a doctor's coat had been waiting for me. Miller pulled something small from his pocket. I didn't need to see it clearly to know it was a syringe. The glint of the needle was unmistakable. He spoke slowly, as if teaching a lesson. "Maya, don't make this difficult. I don't like a fuss. All you have to do is take a little nap, and then everything will be quiet." I gasped. Ryan lunged forward, yelling, "You wouldn't dare." Immediately, two of the men grabbed him. The sound of a scuffle, shuffling feet, clothes scraping against the wall, grunts echoed in the monastery's sacred space. I wanted to scream, but my throat was closed. I could only hold my belly, bite my lip until I tasted blood, and try not to fall. The abbot strode forward, his voice booming with authority. "This is a holy place. What do you think you are doing?" Miller turned to him, still smiling, but his eyes were like daggers. "Venerable sir, you should stick to your chanting. Do not interfere in the affairs of the world." The abbot stood his ground, his hand on his prayer beads, his voice as deep as a temple bell. "Here, the affairs of the world and the affairs of the spirit are one. To commit an evil act under this roof is an insult to the Buddha." I looked at the abbot, my heart filled with both gratitude and despair. A holy place could offer protection for a time, but I was surrounded. I could hear Ryan struggling, held fast. I could hear Miller stepping closer, the faint, sweet scent of his cologne mixing with the incense to create a suffocating smell. I closed my eyes for a second, my hand clutching the old phone in my pocket. It was my evidence and my last hope. I would not let myself collapse here, not because I was brave, but because my child had not yet been born. I didn't dare look at the syringe again. The glint of the needle was enough to make my stomach turn. I pressed myself harder against the rock wall, my hands protectively over my belly, trying to control my breathing. Each breath felt like pulling on a thin thread, one that could snap at any moment. "Doctor." Miller took another step closer, his voice still gentle, as if he were soothing a child. "Maya, be good. I don't want to hurt you." The words were chilling. The people who say they don't want to hurt you are usually the ones about to cause the most pain. Ryan was still struggling against the two men holding him, his face red, the veins in his neck bulging. He managed to yell, his voice hoarse, "Run, Maya." But how could I run? In front of me was a syringe, behind me a wall, and the way down was blocked. I looked at the abbot. He stood in the middle of the corridor, his eyes stern, his voice like a temple gong. "All of you, stop this at once. There are witnesses here, and the Buddha is watching. You are creating terrible karma for yourselves." Miller smirked. "Karma? You're talking to me about karma? I make my living off of what people fear." He gave a slight nod, and one of his men lunged for me, his rough hand grabbing my wrist. I yanked back hard. A sharp pain shot through my lower abdomen. Fear flared up inside me, but something else flared up even stronger. The primal instinct to protect my child. I didn't think. I just acted. I leaned down and bit the back of the hand that was holding me, as hard as I could. The man yelled in pain and let go. In that split second, I used every ounce of strength I had to turn and run toward the main hall. I couldn't run fast, but I ran like I was being chased by fire, my hands still on my belly, my feet struggling for purchase on the stone. Miller's voice was a low hiss, not a shout, as if he were afraid of being overheard. "Get her!" The sound of footsteps echoed behind me. I was gasping for breath, my throat burning. Ahead of me was the monastery's main courtyard. A few worshippers who had been lighting incense turned in surprise. Just as I reached the steps of the main hall, the abbot strode forward and blocked the way, his arms outstretched like a gate. "Stop," he bellowed, his voice resounding through the courtyard. "If you want to harm a pregnant woman in this place, you will have to go through me first." The men hesitated for a beat. In that beat, I pulled the old phone from my pocket. My hands were shaking, but my mind was surprisingly clear. I remembered Ryan's words. Asterisk. If you have evidence, use it. Asterisk. I opened the home folder and selected the recording with Miller's voice. I didn't bother with the earbuds. I turned the speaker on full volume. A soft static, and then the raspy voice of the man from the recording filled the air. "On that mountain pass, all it takes is one truck accidentally swerving into the wrong lane. The police will rule it an accident." The worshippers standing nearby gasped. One of them covered her mouth. I looked directly at Miller. His face changed, just for a second, but it was enough for me to know I had hit his weak spot. He lunged forward to grab the phone. The abbot struck his wooden drum against the stone steps, the sharp times cracked times echoing through the air. Do not be foolish. But these men were not afraid of the Buddha. One of them rushed forward. The abbot didn't fight, but he stood firm, his old body an unmovable obstacle. The man stopped, because now the other worshippers had gathered around. Someone was holding up a phone, recording. Someone else was shouting. "What's going on here? What are you doing?" Miller's eyes narrowed. He hissed, "Turn that thing off." I took a step back, holding the phone to my chest, the recording still playing. My hands were trembling, but I held on as if my life depended on it. My voice was a hoarse whisper. "You wanted to make things clean, didn't you? Well, here it is, for everyone to see." Miller cursed under his breath, then suddenly pulled out the syringe and lunged at me. My heart stopped. In that exact moment, a siren wailed from the monastery gate, tearing through the quiet air. I turned to see two police SUVs and a sedan screech to a halt. Officers in uniform poured out, one of them shouting, "Police! Everybody freeze!" Miller's men panicked. One tried to run, another tried to climb a wall. Miller himself froze for a second, then started to back away, his face ashen. He tried to compose himself, but his eyes were wild. An officer strode forward, his gaze sharp. "Stay where you are." Two other officers tackled the nearest man. As for Miller, he tried to slip away, but the abbot was blocking the corridor. The abbot just looked at him and said softly, "The path of evil is always short." Miller tried to push past him, but an officer was already there, twisting his arm behind his back. The syringe fell to the ground, its needle glinting harmlessly on the stone. I stood there, frozen, my legs giving out from under me. I collapsed onto the steps of the main hall. The abbot came to my side and put a hand on my shoulder. "Breathe slowly, child. Don't let the fear harm the baby." I tried to breathe, but tears were streaming down my face. This time, they weren't tears of sorrow, but of relief. Ryan was released. His shirt was torn, and he had a bruise on his cheek, but he rushed to my side. "Maya, are you okay? Is the baby okay?" I nodded, unable to speak. I just grabbed his hand and held on tight, as if letting go would send me back into the nightmare. A man in plain clothes walked over to me. He was trim, with sharp eyes and a clear voice. "I'm Lieutenant Mark Evans. Are you Miss Maya Anderson?" I looked up. Ryan whispered, "It's him, the one I told you about." "Stay calm." I tried to sit up straight, my voice trembling. "Yes, that's me." Lieutenant Evans looked at me, then at the phone in my hand. He spoke succinctly. "We heard the recording you were playing. I need you to give me that device and tell me where you got it." I held out the phone, my hands still shaking. I had nothing left to hide, and I didn't want to hide anymore. I spoke directly. "This is my husband's phone, Leo Davis. It has recordings related to his accident, and the woman's voice on the recording is my mother-in-law. Lieutenant Evans didn't seem surprised. He nodded, as if a piece of the puzzle had just fallen into place. He gave an order to one of his officers. Secure the scene, take statements from the abbot and the other witnesses. Then, he turned to me, his voice softening slightly. You and your unborn child will be taken for a medical evaluation immediately. From now on, you are not to go anywhere alone. We will provide protection. The word protection made my whole body relax, as if a great weight had finally been lifted. But then another fear surfaced. I grabbed his arm, speaking quickly. I'm afraid my mother-in-law will find out and do something drastic. Lieutenant Evans looked me straight in the eye. Ma'am, now that you have filed a report and provided evidence, any threat against you will be considered an aggravating factor in our case. The most important thing for you to do now is cooperate and stay safe. I nodded, tears falling onto my hand. In that moment, I understood that people can use love to stab you in the back, but you can use the law to stand up for yourself. An ambulance was called. Before I got in, I looked back at the monastery courtyard. The incense still smelled sweet, and the afternoon bell was chiming. The abbot stood on the steps, his hands pressed together. You have made it through, child, he said softly. Remember to keep your heart pure. Do not let hatred blind you. I bowed my head. Yes, venerable sir, I will remember. Ryan rode in the ambulance with me. He sat silently, just occasionally reminding me to drink water and breathe. I looked out the window as the mountains receded. A single thought was crystal clear in my mind. They had wanted to make things clean, but this time, the ones being cleaned out would not be me and my child. I was taken to the town's small medical clinic as evening fell. A doctor checked my blood pressure and the baby's heartbeat, saying that, miraculously, the fetus seemed unharmed by the stress. I lay on the examination bed, my hands still on my belly, as if I was afraid that letting go would make everything fall apart again. Ryan waited outside, the bruise on his face, a stark reminder of the day's events. A young nurse brought me a glass of juice. Try to drink this, she said kindly. A pregnant woman can't let her blood sugar get too low. I sipped the juice. My throat was still raw, not just from fear, but from the realization that if the police hadn't arrived, my child and I could have vanished without a trace, right in a holy place. About half an hour later, Lieutenant Mark Evans came in, accompanied by a female officer who was taking notes. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. He got straight to the point. Miss Anderson, are you well enough to give a formal statement? I nodded. Yes. I'm ready. He pulled up a chair, maintaining a respectful distance. I need you to start from the beginning. Tell me everything, in chronological order. Dates, times, who said what, who did what. Just the facts. I took a deep breath and began. I told him about the day Leo left for the construction project in early July 2025. The pre-dawn phone call about the accident. The bizarrely efficient funeral arrangements. My mother-in-law confiscating the keys. Uncle Hank's obsession with paperwork. I described the day I was thrown out with $5,000 and the address of an abortion clinic. I talked about being followed, the anonymous text message, the meeting with Ryan, and the discovery of Leo's old phone with the home folder. When I got to the part about hearing Brenda's voice on the recording, her cold command to make it clean, my throat closed up. I had to pause for a few seconds before I could continue. The female officer handed me a tissue. Lieutenant Evans just nodded, his eyes sharper now. Are you certain the female voice on that recording is your mother-in-law, Brenda Davis? He asked. I answered without hesitation. Yes. I lived with her. I heard that voice every day. I could never mistake it. And the man, Evan Miller, you first met him at a clinic? I looked him straight in the eye. Yes. He called himself a doctor. But today, I understood. He wasn't there to help me. He was there to lead me into a trap. Lieutenant Evans jotted down a few notes. Do you have any other evidence besides your husband's phone? Ryan has a copy of the files on a USB drive, I said. And I have the anonymous text message. I'm not trying to add anything to the story. I'm just telling you what happened. He nodded, his voice even. We will analyze the data, perform a voice analysis, trace the phone numbers, and track their movements. Your job now is to stay safe and cooperate. The word safe made me realize that my shoulders were shaking. There's an old saying, you can't make something out of nothing. All I wanted now was solid ground to stand on, to stop sinking. After I signed the statement, I was moved to a secure room in a local motel used by law enforcement. An officer was posted outside my door. Ryan came by with a bag of food, a container of chicken and rice soup, and a banana. He whispered, his voice hoarse. "You eat. As long as you're alive, you've won. You hear me?" I looked at him, a sad smile on my face. "You need to get that bruise looked at. Don't be so tough." He just nodded and turned away quickly, as if he didn't want me to see the moisture in his eyes. That night, I slept for a short while, but I was woken before dawn by a soft knock on the door. It was the female officer from the night before. "Miss Anderson, Lieutenant Evans needs to see you." I put on a robe and stepped out. The lieutenant was standing in the hallway, his expression serious, but with a different, more cautious look in his eyes. "Can you come with us to the regional hospital?" he asked. My heart pounded. "What's wrong?" He spoke each word clearly. "The hospital has a John Doe patient who was admitted after a fall into a ravine about 2 weeks ago. He has temporary amnesia and a scar on his left wrist. The physical description and age are a close match to your husband." I stood there, frozen. The world went silent, except for the frantic beating of my own heart. I clutched the fabric of my robe, my voice barely a whisper. "Are you sure?" He shook his head. "We're not sure. That's why we need you to identify him. But you need to be prepared. It might be him, it might not." I nodded repeatedly. I didn't dare to hope. The fall would be too great. But my legs were shaking uncontrollably. The police car drove us to the hospital as the sky was just beginning to lighten. The familiar smell of antiseptic brought back the memory of my collapse. But this time, I didn't fall. I walked slowly, my hand on my belly, whispering to myself, "Stay strong, Maya." A doctor led us to a room at the end of a long corridor. 2 plainclothes officers stood guard outside. Lieutenant Evans knocked and went in first. I followed, my heart about to burst from my chest. On the bed was a man, much thinner than I remembered. His hair cut short, his arm in a cast. He was looking out the window, but he turned as he heard us enter. I saw his face, that nose, that jawline, a face I had looked at and touched every day. But it was gaunt, pale, and his eyes were strange, like those of a man looking at a complete stranger. I stood there, my lips trembling. "Leo?" The man looked at me, his brow furrowed, as if he were trying to search a foggy memory. Then, he asked, his voice raspy, "Who are you?" It felt like a physical blow. Tears welled up in my eyes instantly. I took a step closer, but he instinctively shrank back. His eyes filled with the wariness of someone who doesn't know where he is. Lieutenant Evans said calmly, "It's all right, sir. This is family, here to visit." I choked back a sob. I wanted to rush to him, to hold him, but I was afraid of frightening him. I just held out my hand so he could see my wedding ring, my voice shaking but clear. "I'm Maya, your wife. I'm carrying our child." He looked down at my belly, then back at my face. His expression flickered, just for a second. He raised his left hand, unconsciously touching the scar on his wrist, and then shook his head. I don't remember. I just remember the sound of screeching tires and a bright light. My throat was tight. I wanted to ask him who had done this to him, but I knew this wasn't the time. I just nodded, a tear falling onto my hand. "It's okay. You're alive. That's all that matters. If you don't remember, you'll remember. We'll take it slow." He looked at me for a longer time. The wariness in his eyes began to fade, replaced by a deep confusion. He said softly, as if afraid of hurting me, "I'm sorry. I'm making you cry." A sob escaped me, mixed with a tearful laugh. Even with no memory, he was still the same gentle Leo. I shook my head. "Don't be sorry. Just rest. I'm here." Lieutenant Evans gave me a permissive nod, then spoke quietly with the doctor about the patient's condition and the security protocol. I sat down in a chair next to the bed, keeping a small distance so he wouldn't feel threatened. I started talking, telling him small things. About my preschool class. About how he used to love my crawfish étouffée. About how he always used to say, "Don't worry, honey, I've got this." I didn't mention his mother or the recordings. I just wanted to tether him to the world with warmth. He didn't remember, but he listened. Sometimes, he would close his eyes, as if trying to see what I was describing. When I stood up to get some water, he suddenly asked, his voice quiet, Is Maya your real name?" I turned back, my heart both aching and soaring. "Yes, my full name is Maya Kim Anderson. You used to say it sounded hopeful." He looked at me again, and this time, his eyes were not completely those of a stranger. It was as if a door had cracked open, just a little. I sat back down, my hand on my belly, and breathed. The hospital hallway was noisy, but in that room, for the first time since I was thrown out of my husband's home, I had something solid to hold on to. Leo was alive, and even if his memory was gone, I still had my husband. My child still had a father, and I still had a chance to stand up with the truth on my side. I sat by Leo's bedside for a while longer before the doctor insisted I get some rest. Lieutenant Evans arranged for me to stay in a room at a nearby guest house, with an officer posted for my protection. He was direct. "Maya, from this moment on, you and your unborn child are key witnesses in a major investigation. Do not attempt to contact your husband's family. We will handle everything." I nodded. I knew I could no longer act on emotion. Emotion had gotten me thrown out on the street. This time, I had to be guided by reason. The days that followed were a blur of cold, hard procedure. On August 18, 2025, the police took my second official statement, cross-referencing it with the data from Leo's phone. Ryan handed over the USB drive. Miss Rosa was also brought in to confirm the timeline of my stay at her boarding house and my physical and emotional state. She spoke her mind, her words unpolished, but true. "I don't know who was right or wrong in that family," she said. "All I know is that poor girl was pregnant and kicked out, looking as pale as a ghost. People can be cruel, but the good Lord is watching." Her words brought tears to my eyes, but I no longer trusted in a higher power. I trusted in evidence, in the law. Evan Miller and his accomplices were formally charged. At first, Miller claimed he had only intended to scare me into giving up the phone. But the voice analysis, the cell phone location data, and the testimony of the witnesses at the monastery painted a very different picture. Lieutenant Evans only had to say one thing to him: "Don't think a white coat makes you clean." My mother-in-law, Brenda Davis, was brought in for questioning after a search of her house uncovered financial records showing a large, unexplained wire transfer. Uncle Hank was arrested shortly after. I wasn't there to see it, but just imagining it made my heart grow cold. I had once called her mom. I had endured her cruelty, thinking that patience would eventually bring peace. But I had learned that if you endure too much, people start to think you don't feel pain. The old saying is true: do good, and good will come to you. But sometimes, to find the good, you have to drag yourself out of the bad. Leo was in the hospital for over a month. His memory was like a tangled fishing line, with brief moments of clarity followed by confusion. I didn't push him. Every day, I would tell him a little more about our life together, about how we met in late 2023, how he used to drive all the way from Houston just to eat at my favorite diner in my hometown, about our wedding day in May 2025, how I wore a pale pink dress, and how his hands were shaking when he held the flowers. I told him these stories gently, like a lullaby, knowing that sometimes memories have to be coaxed back with peace, not force. One night in mid-November, Leo suddenly sat bolt upright in bed, clutching his head. He was gasping for air, his words tumbling out. The pass, the headlights, the sound of the horn. A truck. It was pushing us. I held him, trying to calm him down. Lieutenant Evans, who was on duty outside, came in. Leo's story was fragmented, but it was enough to piece together the picture. Just before he had started up the mountain pass, he had received an anonymous text message: "Don't go any further." He was suspicious, but the project was on a tight deadline, and he thought, "I'm just an engineer. Who would want to harm me?" Then, the truck had swerved into his lane, forcing him off the road. The car had rolled down an embankment. He had survived, but he was trapped. By the time he managed to crawl out, he had collapsed from exhaustion. The person who found him was not from his company, but a passing motorist who called 911. Leo looked at me then, as if a painful memory had just surfaced. "Maya. Mom, did she protect you?" My throat was tight. I wanted to say no, but I couldn't bear to inflict that pain on him while he was still so fragile. I just took his hand and said, "I'm alive. Our baby is alive. That's because we were smart enough to get away. As for the rest, we'll let the law decide." On May 5, 2026, the trial began. I walked into the courtroom, my belly large, my hands shaking, but my back straight. In the defendant's box, Evan Miller gave me a cold, familiar look. My mother-in-law sat behind him, her face stripped of makeup, her eyes hollow. Uncle Hank just stared at the floor, all his former bluster gone. When the court clerk played the recording, The sound of that raspy voice saying, "A truck accidentally swerving," the entire courtroom fell silent. I heard Brenda's voice again, "Make it clean," and my heart felt like it was being clawed. But this time, I didn't break. I placed my hand on my belly and told myself, Asterisk, my child needs to see his mother standing tall. Asterisk, Leo was brought in to testify as the victim. He was still thin, but his eyes were clear. When the prosecutor asked him questions, his answers were more lucid than I had expected. He concluded his testimony by saying, "I am not asking for mercy for anyone. I am asking the court to protect my wife and child, because they tried to kill all three of us." That was when I broke down. I cried for the injustice that had finally been named, and for the man who had finally, truly, stood by my side. The sentences were severe. Miller and his accomplices were found guilty of conspiracy and attempted murder. My mother-in-law and Uncle Hank were also convicted for their roles in the plot. I don't need to recall the exact years of their sentences. I just remember the sound of the judge's gavel, the sharp times crack times that echoed through the room, and the feeling of a great weight being lifted from my chest. As I left the courthouse, I didn't look back. I didn't feel hatred. I just thought, the wicked had chosen their own path. They had sown the wind, and now they were reaping the whirlwind. In early February of 2027, I went into labor. The contraction started in the middle of the night, a final, ironic twist from a life that had been full of them. I was scared, but I also had to laugh. After all I had been through, the thing that made me cry the most was the pain of childbirth. Leo held my hand, his eyes red. "Hang in there, honey. I'm here." I remember everything now. I laughed through the tears and the pain. "Well, that's good. But don't you dare forget again, or I'll have words for you." Leo nodded, a look of profound regret and love on his face. Our son was born healthy, his cry thin but strong, a declaration that his mother had protected him. Leo held him, his hands shaking just as they had the day I showed him the pregnancy test. He could only manage one sentence, his voice breaking. "I'm so sorry I left you and your mom alone." I looked at the two of them, at Leo's eyes, which now truly saw me, and I knew that the months of being homeless, of being hunted, were not a stain on my life. They were the price I had paid to learn how to stand on my own. We moved after that. We no longer had the spacious brick house, no longer had the illusion of wealth that had fueled so much greed. Leo took a job at a smaller company, doing the work he loved, at a slower pace. I went back to my preschool, to the sound of children's laughter and the smell of milk and chalk, a simple life that was more precious than gold. The lesson I learned was this: do not place your blind faith in anyone, not even those who call themselves family. And do not let your patience become an excuse for others to trample you. When you must, be smart, hold on to the law, and hold on to yourself. If this story has given you something to think about, please leave a like to support our channel. If you have any thoughts or experiences you'd like to share, please leave a comment below. Thank you, my dear listeners, for joining me to the very end. I wish you all health and peace. Goodbye, and I look forward to seeing you again for our next story on my channel.